Hello, good morning, and welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. I'm your host, Samson Lardy Anyenini. And today is our special edition. This is the Joy Change Speaker Series 2. We did for the first quarter, and here we are with the second quarter. Once again, we present you individuals accomplished in their own rights and who have some issues on their heart that we all must tune in to. 10 change speakers, 10 change statements, 10 critical reviews, and 10 transformative solutions intended to impact you, influence you, and duty bearers for a better Ghana. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
He became independent in 1804. It's been independent for a very long time. Singapore became independent in 1959, 155 years after Haiti's independence. Haiti has not been able to build a high-integrity, high-trust society in all its years of independence. Corruption is rife, there's lots of government dysfunction, and today the per capita income in Haiti is $1,900 a year. Compare that with Singapore, independence in 1959. They built a very high integrity, high trust society, and today the per capita income is $64,000 a year per person. So I just thought, just to make it real, demonstrate just with these two examples, that you actually build a tremendous amount of economic value by building integrity and trust in a society. So the question is, how do we foster that in our universities? I'll share a few ideas about how we might implement it and share from our experience at Ashesi University. Really, just 4 things. One is to have an enforced code of conduct. So a code of conduct that is not something written on paper, but is something that is lived and enforced by the institution. The second is the leaders, faculty, and staff modeling the right behavior. So behaviors around transparency, accountability, fairness, truthfulness. The third is curriculum reform that encourages students, compels students, in fact, to be engaged in the intellectual questions around what constitutes a good society, what is integrity, and why is it important? And I use the word and intellectual engagement very deliberately. You cannot get students to imbue these values if you just preach at them, or you just tell them it is so. There must be an engagement where they're processing and understanding why this is important. And then the fourth is to embed the values into the culture of the organization.
My concern is that over time, constitutional enforcement and justice have become too slow, too expensive, too technical, too narrow, too unpredictable, too incomprehensible, and in the process have outpriced the poor and disadvantaged, have outlawyered the non-lawyers, and have increasingly blocked the pathway that the Constitution opened for even the determined and knowledgeable private solicitors general who seek to enforce the document. I cannot pretend to know the cause of this backslide. All I know is that there's a backslide. Perhaps the excitement of operating in this constitutional ecosystem has waned over time. Whatever it is, I do believe that the enforcement problems have eroded public confidence in the court as an enforcer and sentinel of the Constitution. In turn, enthusiasm about enforcing the Constitution has waned considerably. This is the reason why we have SAL, which nobody seems interested in rushing to the court to seek enforcement. This is the reason why, up till now, we don't know whether the Auditor General was properly removed. This is why the General Legal Counsel insists on a monopoly, contrary to Article 25(2) of the Constitution, which provides that private participants should not be obstructed at any level in providing education.
Unemployment rates among the population 15 years and over is 13.4%. Among the population 13 years to 35 is 19.7%. Even worse is the rate of unemployment among young adults 15 to 24 years. That is 33%. So when you take 3 young adults in Ghana, 1 is definitely unemployed. This is quite alarming and a matter of national security threats, particularly with examples we have seen in other African countries, like in the Arab Spring. What is equally worrying in the report is the fact that more than 46% of the unemployed persons have given up hope. They are no longer looking for jobs, although they are available to work. So indeed, this is something that should tell us that as a country, we need to take a very critical look at our strategies towards employment generation.
Right. And that was Joy Change Speaker Series 1, which was held on January 15, 2022. And it involved Dr. Benjamin Kumbo, Dr. Patrick Ewua, Professor Kweku Asare, Professor Emerita Techua Menu, Dr. Priscilla Chumesi Bafo, Clara Kwalaga Kaseti, Oliver Baka Vomawo, Bright Simmons, and the NCCE's Josephine Nkrumah. Welcome to the Joy Change Speaker Series 2. This is for the second quarter, and I'm glad to be introducing and hosting another group of accomplished individuals who are going to make presentations touching on the economy and how it is managed, job creation issues, education, governance, the judiciary, law enforcement, parliament, politics, security, religion, among others that need the requisite attention. So, welcome once again to this edition, and our guests will be introduced to you as and when they begin to speak, as you see them on the screens. 10 change speakers, we believe they are. They will give us 10 change statements that empower us and influence change in our lives as a nation and even as individuals. They will make critical, blunt reviews on the issues that they speak about, and of course, give us some transformative solutions to the myriad of problems that bedevil this country. Thank you once again, and welcome to Newsfile. And this show is brought to you by the candid sponsorship of Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. Shasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. Waylead Properties, home is where one stars. And Duraplus, where what Duraplus goes, water flows. I'm so much in a hurry to bring our first speaker on to begin with today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Professor Henry Kwesi Prempeh. And Professor Henry Kwesi Prempeh will be speaking to us on the subject of our political parties and our democracy. Are they helping or hurting our democracy? The political parties and our democracy, are they helping or hurting our democracy? Professor Henry Kwesi Prempeh is a professor of law. He's been at Seton Hall University Law School, Newark, New Jersey, in the USA, where he taught courses in constitutional law, comparative constitutional design, and corporate law. Among others, Professor Prempeh has been all over, if you like, particularly Africa, helping nations, countries to design constitutions that are responsive to the people. He is the executive director of the Ghana Center for Democratic Development. Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, please, let's have your statement. Please unmute your mic.
Good morning. Good morning, Samson.
Good morning.
Thank you for deeming me worthy of a slot on this program about change statements. I have chosen to speak today on the question of our political parties. And I don't frame it as our political parties and democracy. Actually, I frame it as our political parties versus our democracy. But it is not exactly clear to me at this point, given the evidence that is before us, and that has been before us in the last 30 years of this new democratic project. It's not exactly clear to me that we have come to see parties as performing the kind of role that we envisioned for them. When 30 years ago, we went to a referendum and voted ourselves a new constitution, which new constitution cleared the way for the unbanning of political parties in readiness for the 1992 general elections. Subsequent to those elections, a newly elected government assumed office January 7, 1993, and brought with it multi-party democracy. Now, we've been a party people for quite some time. It goes way back into our history. Political parties first emerged in Ghana during the Gold Coast years, and not as we usually assume in the post-Second World War period. They actually started much earlier in municipal elections. So when the colonial government opened the door in some selected urban centers or cities and towns to elections to seats on town councils, parties began to emerge. Ratepayers Association, Mambi, and all of those groups. But at the national level, of course, we date the formation of political parties in Ghana to the event culminating in the breakaway of the Convention's People Party, CPP, from the United Gold Coast Convention. At the time, of course, again, the trigger for this was impending elections. We were, for the first time, going to have open elections into a legislative assembly. And that was the impetus for parties to form. So party formation has something to do with the right, having a right to elect representatives into a legislative assembly or into political office. Now, we've had quite a bit of seesaw with parties. So after independence, the dominant view, the dominant elite view represented by the Nkrumah and the CPP, were that multi-parties were divisive. We were a country in a hurry. We couldn't afford the kind of division that we thought the argument then was that parties brought with them. And also that we needed to harness all of our limited resources, human and others, to execute the project of development, which was really the most pressing issue at the time. So the idea, which was not only in Ghana, but it was actually a conventional kind of wisdom at the time, was that we should do away with multi-parties and have just one party. That one party is supposedly going to represent all of us. So we had one-party states. And of course, we also moved on with coups d'etat. We then had no-party governments. Military regimes are essentially no-party governments. Parties are abolished during that period. And so we've tried one-party state, we've tried no-party government. And in fact, at one point, one of those regimes attempted an innovative idea. I mean, in terms of, as far as Ghanaian political science goes, I guess that's probably the most innovative idea that has come from the country, which is a union government, a no-party civilian military police kind of government. All of us, basically working together. It's a referendum was held. The outcome of which was somewhat dubious. The project failed. So we've tried. We rejected union government, and now, of course, each time we have restored democracy, we have done it on the basis of multiple parties, because we think that parties represent something good. And in fact, in the 1992 Constitution, parties are the only private associations for which the Constitution actually makes substantial provision for how it must be shaped and formed and the like, right? Some internal rules and the like. So when you look at Article 55 on the chapter of the representation of people, a whole 17 clauses are devoted to political parties. No other private association of people in the country gets that kind of mention in the Constitution, which tells us that we think parties are special. They are not just private entities as such, they are special. And the character of the party is important to the character, is an important determinant of the character of the democracy that we're going to have. So we try to make a few rules about how those parties must behave or how they must look like. And then when you go to the provision on the Constitution in Chapter 6 on directive principles of state policy, parties are also explicitly mentioned as among those institutions, non-states albeit, that must be guided in their behavior and others by those directive principles of state policy. So Article 34.1 names parties along with the president, cabinets, and all of that as among those bodies to think about the directive principles of state policy in their conduct. So 30 years after the fact, after this democratic project, I think it's a long enough time to do some appraisal of where we think we are with our parties. Are they a force for good in our democracy? Are they behaving as we would expect them to do in our democracy? Are they helping us sustain our democracy? And of course, one could argue that, with parties, we have been able so far to have orderly transitions of power from one regime to the other, over some successive period. So you could say that parties have contributed to that kind of orderly transition of power through the ballot box. And that's fine. But I think increasingly, parties are also beginning to leave a sour taste in the mouth of many Ghanaians. And why do I say that? So there are a few pieces of evidence to support that proposition. we have recently tried. There's been quite a clamor for the democratization of local government through the election of metropolitan, municipal, and district chief executives. That whole project has stalled because a strong majority of Ghanaians are opposed to the entry of political parties into our local government space. So, survey after survey, by CDD, by NCC, by IBEC, show that Ghanaians do not want political parties. And when you ask them, the debates that we had, including on social media, around the referendum that was called off in December 2019 about parties, even civil society organizations, pro-democracy civil society organizations, were strongly opposed to the involvement of parties. Ghanaians have also not been warm to the idea of public funding for parties. Whenever it has been thrown up, there's huge opposition to the idea. And then you see that a substantial number of Ghanaian voters are so, frustrated with the absence of checks and balances between our parliament and the executive branch, that they think that the solution to that is to divide those branches between two parties. So all of these are evidences that somewhat our parties have not impressed us, and that we would really are having a rethink. I don't even know if today, if you had the union government referendum today, how it would look like, whether Ghanaians would actually go for a no-party state. And in fact, a strong, an emerging constituency of youth voters, young people, are beginning to entertain ideas of, democracy, but without parties, not just here, in many other places. So I think this is causing me, as a Democrat, to really, ask ourselves, it's causing me some, apprehension, and I'm worried about what it is that we're getting from our party. So for me, this idea of political parties, it's not as though we are rejecting parties per se. And in fact, we did recently some focus group discussions across the country on this idea of why to really tease out why people don't want political parties, for example, in local government elections. And when you push the idea, when you push them, present different scenarios and options, what you get is a sense that it is not political parties per se. It is certain behaviors, certain tendencies that our parties have exhibited and have shown themselves to exhibit. That is actually putting people off. And what are those behaviors? So tension during elections. Each time we have general elections coming up, we approach it with a lot of apprehension and anxiety. Why? Because it has become almost the equivalent of war, especially for our two main rival parties. Election violence and political party vigilantism, a term that we didn't, have, in our democratic nomenclature, but for parties. A lot of, apprehension about election violence and vigilantism. And even in internal party primaries, we have begun to see, incidents and high risk of some such violence. Our parties and partisans have exploited and exacerbated pre-existing conflicts across the country, chieftaincy disputes and others. Every little thing is now given, every little conflict sooner than later takes on a party flavor. This is beginning to heighten polarization in our society. In between elections, what are we seeing with our parties? We may not have a de jure one-party state, and we don't, but we do have a party state now. And the party states, our party states operates essentially as a one-party state just in 4-year increments. The party that wins power, and I'm talking not just about winner takes all, but there's a certain party-first ideology an agenda that has replaced the national and public interest as the guiding principle in governance. In the 1960s, the slogan was the CPP is Ghana and Ghana is the CPP. Today, when the NPP is in power, the NPP is Ghana and Ghana is the NPP. And when their rivals take over, Ghana becomes the NDC and the NDC becomes Ghana. The party card has become more valuable than the Ghana card. Just look at the sheer amount of investment in advertising and other carrots and sticks we had to throw in for the average Ghanaian to go and queue for a Ghana card. The party card, for the party card, you don't need advertisement at all. In fact, they won't even, they will hide it from you. It's a very scarce commodity. The demand far outstrips the supply, and the supply is kept actually intentionally low by the party executives, because really our parties are not that interested in members. They just want voters. They just want you to vote for them. Members, the fewer the merrier. So there's a number of developments that we're seeing. Protocol, based on partisan criteria, has now come to replace meritocratic and open recruitment into our public services and state enterprises. And what we are talking here is how scarce livelihood opportunities in a very low job creation economy are distributed. And they are distributed now, basically according to partisan criteria. So you see that the party and the state has become basically synonymous, and there's this clear state capture by our parties. And there are no sacred cows in this. All public institutions are up for grabs. Universities, everywhere, even in student unions, because the capture is proceeding apace. It has made fighting corruption and even sometimes just ordinary criminality difficult, very difficult, if not impossible, because once it emerges that a party person is involved, and it doesn't even have to be some big oligarch or kingpin, sometimes just the local, it becomes difficult to actually proceed with the appropriate criminal liability or punishment. So impunity is running amok because parties and partisans are making it difficult to enforce the law. They become tin gods above the law. Parliament is supposed to be an oversight body, but Parliament is not a uniparty organization. And to the extent that there are rivals parties there, they have failed basically in their work as a check on the executive, because the party of the executive basically almost always predictably goes along with the executive's agenda. We see a lot of party militias and foot soldiers engaging in thuggery. Difference between campaigning and governance has all but disappeared. We have almost like a permanent campaign even when elections are over. The next 4 years is not just for governing. Every time is for campaigning as well. Okay. So when you put all of this together, it appears to a lot of Ghanaians that now when we vote, what do we vote for practically? We vote practically essentially for which group of partisans and their kin and associates to make rich, to put above the law, to make untouchable in our society. This is definitely not what we signed up for when we signed up for democracy with parties in April 1992. Instead of democracy as government of the people, by the people, for the people, today the people matter largely as subjects and as voters once every 4 years. In the period in between and after elections, democracy has become in large measure government by the party and partisans for the party and partisans. And I worry because we're seeing globally, including in our region, a certain recession, democratic recession. We have been spared some of the events that have happened elsewhere, democratic collapse in other societies. But collapse is not we shouldn't collapse before we get worried. The degradation of the quality of our democracy is, for me, what matters. Excellent. And we still have time and an opportunity, right, to make, to change course.
All right.
To make the appropriate correction and to change course.
All right.
And I think also, one of the reasons that this has to matter to us is that while we may not admit it, and we hate oftentimes to admit the truth, our parties too, our two main rival parties especially, despite appearances to the contrary, are in significant respects rival ethno-regional coalitions. Thereby, so it exacerbates the implications of some of these behaviors. So that, for example, if you distribute scarce public resources like jobs and the like, according to partisan criteria, what you're also doing is giving a certain ethno-regional coloration to the distribution of opportunities in our society. All of these things, when you put that together, we are really, I think our parties are behaving in a way that is giving democracy a bad name, taking democracy for granted. They are some of the biggest beneficiaries of our democracy since 1993, and yet, in my view, are not behaving in ways that ensure the long-term sustainability of this democratic project.
Okay. Thank you so very much, Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh. Now, my guests are to speak for a maximum of 15 minutes, and I have the opportunity of 2 questions to them, to which they respond in some minutes. I'll say thank you so very much to Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh once again. I do not have the intention to ask any question. And thank you really very much indeed. As they say, faith comes by hearing. We hope and trust that as we continue to talk and discuss and share these concerns among ourselves, and for those who must hear and act as they continue to listen, some change will come and will not be forced in a manner that doesn't help the country. Next, on your Joy Change Speakers Series 2, Impacting Influence for a Better Ghana, our next speaker is Bridget Akosua Jugbanuku, who was the presidential candidate for the promising third force, PPP, in 2020. That's the elections. She's the founder and executive director of Mentoring Women Ghana, which runs mentoring programs to empower young girls and women into leadership to make a difference in their respective communities. She was the general manager of Aviation Social Center for 12 years. She founded a recreational facilities management company, which was in charge of running the Barclays Clubhouse until 2015. She also served in an NYU Wagner Institute program where she coached participants of the Ghanaian Women's Social Leadership Program in 2014 and 2015. Of course, some of you have been made to relate to her first in November 1990 as Miss Ghana. She's a businesswoman, entrepreneur, and socio-political activist. Thank you so very much for making time to join us.
Thank you, Samson, for having me.
Shall we hear you?
Okay. I'm going to speak on the need for constitutional amendment. And as you mentioned, this is the view, my view, and indeed the view of the party that I represented in 2020. So I'd like to thank you, Samson, Joy FM, and Newsfile for this opportunity to make the statement on national issues and my attempt to make some proposals with respect to good governance and how we can reap rapidly the benefits of a democratic society. I think that the previous speaker before me, HKP, has mentioned a lot of the things, but I would like to add to them as well. So we will begin with our Constitution. Recently, we were patting ourselves on the back and on marking 30 years of the adoption of the 1992 Constitution as the basis of our current democracy and the Fourth Republic. 30 years, well done to us indeed. But such an agreement between the governors and the people would and should normally reflect well-negotiated terms that are fair to both the people and their government, equal or almost equal partners in national development. However, a closer look at the current Constitution presents a worrisome spectacle of a predatory relationship between the government and the people. Our Constitution is lopsided, and the power scale is so much tilted in favor of the governors or elected officials, or as we call them today, the political elite. As a result, we, the people, have not enjoyed the full benefits of a democratic state in the terms of the adequate provision of social services, water, electricity, basic roads in our communities. I live in Teshinongwa Estate, residential areas, a nationwide, well-functioning public education system and health systems, and well-resourced district assemblies, effective systems of accountability, an efficient body of public service officers who treat citizens with respect and dignity, safe interregional motorways, decent housing, jobs for the youth, political accountability, reduction in corruption, stability of the currency, and overall, a good standard of living. There are indicators for measuring the success or otherwise of a democracy, and not a mere periodic conduct of elections and the successful, peaceful transition or transfer of power from one administration to the other. Our 30-year democratic experience has rather registered massive levels of youth unemployment, excessive and unfettered executive powers, a compromised parliament, abuse of power, unbridled corruption, waste of Ghana's resources, nepotism, mediocrity, mismanagement of the economy, and a constant failure of leadership. In fact, the current Constitution, in my view, has created a situation where the winning political parties have treated the Republic as a colony to be conquered, and its resources taken for the welfare of the few privileged members, the political elite of the party in power, depriving the significant majority of Ghanaians the dividends of a well-constituted democratic state. I think HKP said it, that the stability of the country is threatened by the youth, of course, by this situation and an intensely exclusionary political system where citizenship is no longer a requirement or enough requirement to have access to the state resources and to partake in the sharing of the national cake. A citizen must necessarily, as HKP said, require membership of the party in power to benefit from the welfare state. We risk losing the continued support and defense of this Constitution has enjoyed from the people. And in fact, people are getting disgruntled if we do not take steps to correct some of the defects identified within the present Constitution. So some important areas for constitutional amendments where there are defects and we must amend would include these 5 fundamental changes that need immediate attention to guarantee some modicum of progress if Ghana is to gain or get any dividends in our last democratic experiment. The 5 areas are as follows. Return power to the people for all Ghanaians to directly elect their district, municipal, and metropolitan chief executives without any interference from the president and council government appointees into the district assembly. To prohibit members of parliament from being appointed as ministers of state, or else MPs must resign from parliament after their ministerial appointment. 3, strengthen the office of Attorney General by separating it from the Ministry of Justice. 4, introduce a public declaration of assets regime. And 5, clarify the eligibility of Ghanaians in the diaspora to hold public office. Let's start with the MMDCs, election of the MMDCs. It would be superfluous to recount the benefits of electing directly and by universal adult suffrage all our metropolitan, municipal, and district chief executives, as well as all the members of the district assemblies. In addition, the concept of governmental appointees should be completely abolished. The matter has been flogged over the years, with elected governments demonstrating a lack of political will to empower the districts to elect their chief executive officers who are true agents of development. As someone said, no one wants to preside over their own demise. So rather, the members of parliament whose job is to pass legislation have arrogated to themselves the role of development agents with no constitutionally allocated resources. And indeed, the people have started to believe that it's the MP who will develop their districts. The result is that MPs have resorted to all kinds of unorthodox ways and policy violations to attempt to bring some piecemeal development to the people. For example, the office of the chief executive has become a trophy to be won and hijacked by elected political parties to reward party members who could neither become members of parliament nor ministers of state. The practice has been for political party leaders to travel around the country to vet and establish the loyalty of DCE applicants to the party in power. In other words, loyalty to the party is the main consideration for appointment as district chief executive. The election of district chief executives is long overdue because it remains a democratic deficit and a major impediment in the development of the various smaller units that constitute Ghana. It will ensure that all resources allocated by the Constitution through the District Assembly Common Fund are demanded by the elected officers and same sent to the district promptly for local development. As it stands now, I think the District Assembly Common Fund is almost 3/4 in arrears. It will ensure local accountability, elimination of corruption, and rapid development. If citizens are capable of electing the president, who is high above them, and members of parliament, they should be credited with the wisdom to decide who governs them at the local level, surely. Denying the good people of Ghana their power following the aborted referendum, whether or not MMDCs should be elected on partisan basis, must be viewed as a coup d'etat indeed against the people of Ghana by the political class. The question of a partisan election of MMDCs or otherwise can only be answered by Ghanaians at a referendum, so no one can deny Ghanaians that opportunity under the pretext of a lack of consensus. As it was said by the previous speaker, Ghanaians have indeed become distrustful of political parties anyway. So they have decided that they do not want to do this on partisan basis. And if we want to test the veracity of that, maybe we should put it to a referendum. How else can we know the position of Ghanaians on this matter other than through a referendum? No president or any other member of the political class should use the partisan debate to conveniently deflect the urgent need for all DCEs plus all assembly members to be elected freely and by universal adult suffrage. For the avoidance of doubt, we can actually elect our chief executives without going for a referendum. All that we need to do now is for Parliament to amend Articles 242D, which deals with the appointments of 1/3 of Assembly members, and Articles 2431 and 2433, which deals with the appointments or, in quotes, disappointment of the chief executive. Making a referendum on Article 55.3, which prohibits political parties from local government elections, a precondition for electing MMDCs, is mischievous and a calculated attempt to postpone once again a very constitutional amendment. So at this point, government should choose patriotism over partisanship and allow people of Ghana to elect their own DCs. If we want Ghanaians to allow political parties to participate in the local elections, the referendum will show for that. This major step in amending Article 243 will be the least the political holders can do to demonstrate a commitment to ceding power to the people. The second one is to separate MPs from ministers by amending Article 78(1). We advocate strongly the concept of strict separation of powers because the current arrangement, where the 1992 Constitution by design bequeathed Parliament to the executive, has hampered Parliament's ability to exact accountability from the executive on behalf of the people. Article 78(1) mandates the President to appoint majority of his ministers from Parliament. This means that more than half of all the ministers and deputy ministers must be members of Parliament. So every member of Parliament indeed looks up to the President for a ministerial appointment, and therefore their immediate priority is not to check the government against malfeasance, but to catch the eye of the President for appointment. Or look the other way, where as it may apply. This has resulted in a compromised Parliament, which is obviously ineffective in scrutinizing the activities of the executives to guarantee the judicious application of the nation's resources. For example, apart from ministerial appointments, some members of Parliament are appointed as chair and members of board of directors of state-owned enterprises, corporations, and other institutions, thereby compromising the supervisory role of Parliament, Public Accounts Committee, cases of corruption. These are the same people sitting in there. These appointments to buy loyalty blur the lines of checks and balances. The proposal is that if a member of Parliament is appointed as a minister or accepts any other appointment by the President, then he or she must resign his seat before taking up the appointment. People seeking to become public officers must choose to either become part of the legislature or the executive, not both. Attorney General, amending Article 88. Article 88 of the Constitution should be amended to separate the Attorney General from the Minister of Justice, or more specifically, the Attorney General must not be a Minister of State or a member of the government. We believe that making the Attorney General a Minister of State compromises his or her ability to fight and prosecute political corruption. The failure of the Special Prosecutor's Office and its lack of independence has been made clear to the Ghanaian electorate by now. What we need to fight political corruption effectively is the immediate establishment of the Independent Public Prosecutor's Office, separate from the Minister of Justice. This is the only way to realistically fight corruption. A truly independent Attorney General or independent public prosecutor who will have a budget sanctioned by Parliament without any ministerial interference. No amount of political spinning or propaganda can make the current Office of the Special Prosecutor independent of the Attorney General and by extension independent of the Executive. It is evident from our past experience that it will be fruitless to leave the fight against corruption in the hands of an elected government and its appointees. For this reason, the independent public prosecutor should be elected directly by the people to check the governments against political corruption. The people's prosecutor will be elected on a different electoral cycle, preferably during the midterm of an elected government. The independent public prosecutor will be given the vast prosecutorial powers with guaranteed tenure, independence, and adequate funding from Parliament to go after corrupt government officials. The government's own lawyer then will be the Minister of Justice. Public declaration of assets. Another tool in the fight against corruption is effective assets declaration regime, an effective assets declaration regime. The current process where asset declaration forms and its contents are concealed is laughable and ironic. How does one publicly declare something while concealing it at the same time? The recommendation of the Constitution Review Commission for a new assets declaration regime where the completed forms are published and can be accessed by any interested citizen for the purpose of verification is in order. The Constitution Review Commission also recommended criminal prosecution for false declaration, a duty the proposed independent public prosecutor will gladly take on board. We need to confront political corruption head-on if we want to safeguard this last attempt at constitutional democracy. Public declaration of assets should be the minimum threshold for any aspiring public office holder to meet as a condition to hold in trust massive public assets and resources of the Republic. If one cannot declare her relatively small assets to the citizens, then she has no right to take charge of huge public assets. Ghanaians in the diaspora, lastly. Ghanaian citizens are Ghanaian citizens, whether they hold dual nationality or not. In fact, their citizenship of Ghana cannot be debased by virtue of the fact that they hold dual nationality. Dual nationality is secondary to citizenship. We must introduce an amendment to the Constitution to clarify and allow Ghanaians living in the diaspora to be fully eligible to participate in the democratic process. This will ensure full citizenship rights to Ghanaians living abroad so that they can vote and serve in public sector positions. There is no justification whatsoever to deny our kith and kin such rights when they pour into our economy huge sums of foreign exchange by way of remittances to family and friends. We should be reminded that on many occasions we have sought and continue to seek the expertise of skills of Ghanaians in the diaspora in the area of sports, medicine, engineering, finance, academia, international relations, economic development, and other areas of consultancy services in different sectors of our national life. We must restore full citizenship rights to our sisters and brothers in the diaspora and clarify provisions on their qualification to become public office holders. In conclusion, it is said that every living thing must grow as it ages. Anything that ages but does not grow stagnates and dies. That is the case of our 30-year-old Constitution, which has aged but not grown. We cannot continue to apply the same principles of a fledgling democracy emerging from a military regime with near dictatorial rule to after 8 successful elections, almost 8. The massive amount of money invested in the constitutional review exercise must not be allowed to go to waste. It shall remain a scar on the conscience of right-thinking Ghanaians, like you and I, if these fundamental changes and many other brilliant recommendations contained in the CRC's report continue to gather dust. We owe it to ourselves and the next generation to secure and safeguard our democracy, and that can only be achieved through these amendments. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. And already messages are coming in. And Frank Anderson Jr., sending this out of Ghana, says that these presentations so far encouraging him to appreciate the need to mobilize civil society and Ghanaians in general to drive the needed change. He talks about the power and influence of such activities. Thank you so very much. Bridget Jogbonoku, she was the presidential candidate of the PPP in the 2020 elections. Of course, and I must make a disclosure. I voted for you because I believe that we need to trust in the third force, and more importantly also because I believe that women have what it takes to give us a certain change in the public space. Thank you very much. We will engage our next change speaker right away, and that is Nana Kofi Akwa. He's a documentary photographer and lead pastor at the Accra Community Church. He describes himself as possessed by Christ. You will be blown off your feet when you hear him. Welcome, sir. Please unmute your mic. Right.
All right.
Great, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Yeah, you can hear me. Fantastic,
Right.
and thank you. Thank you so much for the privilege and the opportunity to be here. Amazing submissions already. So I want to speak on why, as a nation, I feel that we are sitting on gold and begging for brass. Knowing everything you know about Ghana, everything from politics to religion to culture to education to health, knowing everything you know about the state of affairs in this country now, I want you to imagine, based on the truth you know, where Ghana will be in 20 years. Considering the trajectory we're on, where will we be in 30 years, in 40 years? What future will our children inherit? We are selling all our forests, cutting down all the trees. We are pouring concrete everywhere. Our sea is full of plastic waste. Our fishermen catch more plastic than fish nowadays. Artisans can't find apprentices. Our young people are sports betting their future away or selling their bodies on social media. They call it hookups, or looking for a way to get out of this hot country. Yes, the country is hot, but nothing changes. But if nothing changes now, can you imagine how much hotter things will be in 20 years? What kind of Ghana will our children have? Ever since Europeans discovered Elmina in 1471, we have never been the same again. Before they came, we were not Ghanaians. We were tribes and clans and many beautiful languages. Today, what are we? We are struggling to define exactly what it means to be a Ghanaian. If Ghana was a brand, it's a struggling one. It still lacks a clear identity and definition. What does it mean to be a Ghanaian? What does it mean to live on God's most blessed land, fertile from border to border, gold laden from north to south, and yet beg for brass? Why do we sit on gold and beg for brass? Some years ago, I was in The Hague, and a Dutch politician, finding out I was from Ghana, walked up to me and said, "I hear you're from Ghana." I said, "Yes." And he said, "One of your ministers was here last week to beg for money." And in my mind, I was like, I bet he went in a three-piece suit to beg for the money so they can buy fleets of Land Cruiser V8s, so they can pretend there are no potholes on the road they constructed just the year before, half of which has already eroded. I was embarrassed and cynical, I have to say. But many things about this country also inspire me. There are many things that break my heart, but many also inspire me. In Sierra Leone, during the campaign that brought Mada Bio into power, I heard one of the politicians on radio yelling, "Vote for me. When I become president, I will improve healthcare. No longer will our people go to America for treatment. No longer will our people go to London for treatment. No longer will our people go to Ghana for treatment." Ghana, yes. Ghana's healthcare system supports more than just Ghanaians. A lot of our brothers and sisters across the sub-region come here for medical care and tourism. We are doing some things right. All hope is not lost yet. My objective for being here this morning is to find like-minded folk who can commit to our collective development outside the dictates and promises of politics. I am not a politician. I'm just a photojournalist who roams the continent. I'm the pastor. And I'm looking for people who are eager to continue this conversation even beyond this event. How do we move this nation forward? Today, corruption holds us back like an oversized hernia dangling between a runner's legs. Our economic bucket has been leaking since the days of Kwame Nkrumah, and now the bucket has lost its bottom. So no matter how much you pour in, it all leaks out.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
The e-levy, that too will leak out just like everything else, unless we change. Sometimes it's not more you need, it is integrity and wisdom you need. In my humble opinion, I think all Ghanaians are corrupt to some degree, different degrees, but we are tolerant of corruption. Integrity and honesty have never been virtues we've truly valued, nurtured, or rewarded. Kweku Anansi is our hero. He is crafty and selfish, and we admire him more than the pious, gentle, meek, and mild Jesus many of us claim to follow. We are more Kweku Anansi's children than we might want to admit. Fellow Ghanaians, let me borrow that very famous expression, fellow Ghanaians. Why are we corrupt? We are corrupt because we get away with it. We are corrupt because we have forgotten who we truly are. The average Ghanaian today cannot go back 3 generations. If you ask them, what is the name of your great-grandparents? Many will stare at you blankly. They don't know. Ask them to say 1,234,378 in their mother tongue. They can't. Now, if you can't go back 3 generations, how can you go forward 3 generations? How can you think about the future? The future of your children, the future of your grandchildren, the future of your great-grandchildren. As a nation, I think we are myopic. Colonialism stripped us of our identity and told us we were less than. So we spend precious money on extravagant trifles, fancy houses, expensive cars, and designer clothing just so we can get some respect. In fact, even when we invest our money in expensive Western education, heap up their certificates and titles, all we become are copies of someone else. Educated, colonized Africans. We will never be British enough, we'll never be American enough, we'll never be white, we will never be truly accepted. And as long as we remain copies, we should know that it is always the original that fetches great value. Nobody pays enough money for copies. But what does it mean to be an original? What does it mean to be an original, authentic Ghanaian? How does that even look like? My dear friends, the word of the average Ghanaian is like the promise a man makes at his pinnacle of bliss. He doesn't remember it afterwards. I think as a nation, we have a cognitive dissonance issue, and it threatens our future. Cognitive dissonance is when the choir is singing, "Joy to the world, the Lord is come." But if you watch the faces of the choristers singing, you think they just bit into some unforgiving lemon. Cognitive dissonance is when you lock your shop to go and pray the whole day for God to bless your business. It is when you pay tithe or do sadaqah from stolen money or say, "God bless you," after collecting a bribe. Cognitive dissonance is when we show up at 8, 8:30, 9, 10 for a 7 o'clock meeting, until we develop a new culture where a person's word is their bond. And people are held accountable for their words and actions and expect to be held accountable for the promises they make, whether on a political platform or from the pulpit of a church or in the privacy of their home or at the business table. Unless we start expecting accountability for the words we speak, mediocrity will continue to be our bane. Some years ago, I was hired to photograph a road project that connected some African countries. The roads from Addis Ababa to Moyale, this is where Addis Ababa, Ethiopia and Kenya meet. The road from Addis Ababa to Moyale was perfect. So I thought to myself, this is Ethiopia. The contractor knows if they do a shoddy job, they'll go to jail. That's why they've done an excellent job. And then I entered the Kenyan part of that road, that same road. And from Moyale, the Kenyan part of Moyale, all the way to Nairobi, the road was just as good as Ethiopia's. The last part of that assignment was the Fofoso Solar Road. Have you seen that road? Have you been on it? Ghana has many problems, but we don't actually need many solutions. Today, hospitals get away with it when patients who shouldn't die do die. The poor who can't afford sheep and goats struggle to get justice. Politics is like Kokofu football. If you don't have a brother in the game, you don't get a pass. Adults who should know better thought it was okay to sabotage the future of 2 Rastafarian kids because they won't cut their locks. We are a petty people. And the more powerful we get, the pettier we become. When are we starting serious conversations on respect and tolerance? Tolerance for those who believe different. Isn't it weird that first and foremost, a church will build prisons and then send their lawyers to go and argue for homosexuals to be jailed? Are we Pharisees or Christians? If we are Christians, then shouldn't Christ be our example? And when will we hold the syndicates that beg with children all across our cities accountable? They exploit these children under the guise of Islam. Able-bodied adults beg with vulnerable children, and we all do nothing. You find some of them begging just a few meters from where our president lives. What future will these children have? What kind of Ghanaians are they going to be as adults? And when are we going to feel shame for every woman we see carrying loads on their heads? Our women, our daughters, sisters, and wives are not donkeys. They are not beasts of burden. When are we going to be enraged enough to change the Kayayo culture? As a father and a pastor, I can tell you for a fact, fellow Ghanaians, that the hypocrisy of a parent damages a child's faith in God much quicker than any temptation out there. I have seen what religious extremism can do. I have documented the impact of jihadist activities in Gundam in northern Mali, in Dori and Kaya in Burkina Faso. I can tell you story after story of how unstable this region is. Ghana isn't as safe as we think it is. The harder life gets for the vulnerable Ghanaian, the greater the risk of them being recruited by those who seek to capture West Africa through terrorism. As long as we stay petty, self-serving, and corrupt, others will feast on our gold and will keep begging them for brass. I dream and see a Ghana where our people are truly proud of who they are. Yes, our names may be different, our languages may be different, our faiths may be different, but at heart, we'll be the same good people, share the same vision, and work together to create a better future for our children. I know it won't be easy, but it is not impossible. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And you just been listening to our change speakers in their attempt to awaken all of us to the matters that are important to us and that need us to be thinking every day, every minute, to do our bit to effect the change that is needed to give us the country that we look to. And Nana Kofi-Akwa has been speaking on sitting on gold and begging for brass. Thank you so very much once again, Nana Kofi-Akwa. Our next speaker is going to talk about where are our public intellectuals? A question many have been asking. Where are our public intellectuals? And Dr. Kwame Akufo-Addo is the one to deliver that statement to us. He has been Director General of the State Broadcaster. He has over 2 decades, about 3 decades of professional experience in broadcasting as both a practitioner and scholar. His professional experience spans public broadcasting at GBC as well as consulting for other media and communication interests across the world. Dr. Kwame Akufo-Addo, thank you very much for your time. Please, you have the stage.
Thank you very much, Samson, and good day to my viewers and my listeners. My topic for today poses a question, as you rightly pointed out, and the question is, where are our public intellectuals? I pose this question cognizant of the fact that public intellectuals are essential to the definition, the quality, and direction of public discourse, and by extension, public policy. I try to very briefly outline who a public intellectual is and why the media in particular have an essential role to play in making the impact of the public intellectual fully felt. So having said that, let me dig straight into the substantive argument. Aristotle considers Sophocles one of the greatest dramatists in the world and described one of his classics, Oedipus Rex, as the best tragedy ever to be written. In Oedipus Rex, from which the psychological affliction Oedipus complex is derived, Sophocles created a dramatic moment when Oedipus, the king of Thebes, summons a blind seer. His name is Tiresias, and he summons him to his palace to divine why Thebes was in such turmoil. The previous king, Laius, son of Labdacus, had been killed by highway robbers, according to accounts. And since Oedipus took over as a king and married Laius's widow Jocasta, the kingdom had known no peace. Oedipus sent emissaries to Phoebus to inquire what should be done, and the oracle divines that the killer of Laius be found and killed or banished before peace can be restored in Thebes. Oedipus, therefore, called Tiresias over to use, and I quote, laws sacred and profane, all heavenly and earthly knowledge in his grasp, end of quote, to save the city from further affliction. Tiresias declares Oedipus the cause of the affliction, publicly declaring him the cursed polluter of the land. Understandably, Oedipus is incensed. He calls Tiresias a conspirator whose aim is to unseat him, and declares his form of divination fake and third-rate, referring to him as a peddler of fraudulent magical tricks with eyes wide open for profit, but blind in prophecy. Tiresias shoots back and states that if the truth is anyone's defense, then he has escaped any consequence by uttering it, challenging Oedipus, who taunts him for his blindness, to call him blind when he can prove him wrong. I invoke this dramatic moment only as an analogy to illustrate my topic for today. Who is a public intellectual? What is his or her social role? And more importantly, where are our public intellectuals in Ghana? By invoking Sophocles, I seek to underline a couple of things about the Tiresias-Oedipus confrontation and some of the characteristics that typically define the nature and conduct of a public intellectual. The designation of a blind seer is not only an oxymoron, but it also signifies a deep-seatedness of knowledge, sometimes hidden beyond the obvious or what the eye can see. Tiresias was summoned into the king's presence because of his competence and deep knowledge of law, sacred and profane. All heavenly and earthly knowledge are in your grasp, says Oedipus. In his declaration, Tiresias displays independent thought in spite of the unequal social positions of the two adversaries, one as a king, the other as a subject. Oedipus indeed threatens Tiresias of physical harm and asks him if he expects to escape the consequence. Tiresias responds, "I've escaped. The truth is my defense." The dangers of physical harm notwithstanding, he sticks to what he sees and unswervingly speaks truth to power, insisting on his right to rebuttal when he says, "King though you are, one right to answer makes us equal, and I claim it." End of quote. As a remainder of the play proves, Tiresias was right. So, who is a public intellectual? Hawkins and Karen set the right tone when they observed that, as a proper noun, intellectual has typically imbued its nominee not only with knowledge, insight, and expertise, but also with social, political, and ethical responsibilities to intervene in issues of the day on behalf of the public good. And I want you to underline that, on behalf of the public good. From the above, the public intellectual is not merely an intellectual who sees himself or herself as autonomous and independent from the ruling social group, believing to stand for truth and reason. He or she is also, in Gramsci's words, an organic intellectual in the sense that they emerge from and tie to social classes, speaking on his behalf with a clear advocacy accent. It is this emancipatory project of the public organic intellectual that differentiates him or her as an activist, someone seeking social transformation, often in contradiction with the dominant worldview of the ruling elite, from a simple armchair traditional intellectual. By emancipatory benefit of the society, I'm seeking to underline particularly the feature of the public intellectual as a voice of the voiceless, and the burden he or she carries by speaking or acting in their interest, especially against special, elite, or corporate interests. It is not always that the public intellectual places their expertise to the benefit of the public and the citizenry. There are abundant empirical examples that suggest that they can also serve in various roles within the political system, including economic interests, as advisors, experts, or administrators. In short, truth can be usurped by the intellectually powerful, not always in the public interest. It would be presumptuous, even foolhardy, therefore, to automatically link the knowledge base of certain intellectuals to the benefit of the general good. By pointing out that the public intellectual must not only have a politically external and nominally independent role, but also comment publicly on the social condition with the objective of influencing or guiding its future, Karen and Hawkins sought to differentiate the public intellectual who acts as a guard dog of the system from another who seeks to question it. One seeks to reinforce the status quo and its worldview, The other seeks to undermine the status quo through constant interrogation of its knowledge and worldview, and especially on behalf of the marginalized. So before I contextualize my topic, let me tie the knot so far together. 1, a public intellectual expresses knowledge, what Aristotle calls episteme, not just opinion. 2, he or she speaks for the public good as against special interest tied to the political system. 3, he or she expresses independent thought by remaining external to the political system. And 4, and perhaps more importantly, he serves as an advocate seeking through public speech to guide or influence social conduct. Lest I be charged with Afghanistanism, the journalistic sense of focusing on distant matters unrelated to one's audience, let me now place this topic within our local context and provide some rationale for its choice. One of the things that struck me about this invitation to speak at this event, was the event organizers' hope that through my topic, I may be able to influence public policy and conduct for our individual or collective progress, end of quote. I hope this encounter achieves that objective. But be it as it may, I begin this reflection from the position that the hope of influencing public policy and conduct is not only one of the fundamental pillars upon which a deliberative democracy thrives and a public intellectual gains expression, it is also one of the cornerstones of our media, especially if they intend to perform their watchdog role rather than a guard dog one. A watchdog looks out for threats to the larger society. A guard dog protects those who belong to the kennel and barks to ward off threats to their survival. Rather than seek consensus, the public policy process could be instrumental in its rationality. It could be very contentious in its performance, and it could be very divisive in its outcome. My question about where our public intellectuals are, therefore, is situated within our current heavily mediated condition and how media, both mainstream and alternative, perform this social watchdog function, either as meaning makers, and by that I mean interpreters of social and daily happenings, as chroniclers of our civic life, that is to say, bearing witness and placing events on record, or just as sites where rational critical debate occur as a public sphere. If public policy is for the good and interest of the general public, and as citizens, we are duty-bound to partake in its formulation and or implementation, either directly through free expression and debate, or indirectly through our representatives. Then aside boardrooms and privileged access locations where public policy is conducted, our media are one of the sites or conduits through which the process of active engagement between policymakers and the public occur. If we accept this premise, then the nature of our media, including who owns it, its editorial independence, how it is funded, and whose interest it serves, either for power, for profit, or for public interest, all come together to create a situation where consent is either manufactured, and I'm quoting Herman and Chomsky, or consent is arrived at through rigorous deliberation. I'm arguing that there are two main sides and processes for policymaking. One is privileged with restricted access to carefully selected players, and there are more open others, such as various media sites where social and governance issues get raised and discussed. The closer the citizen can come to inputting into public policy debate. However, while policymaking within privileged sites bring together specialists, politicians, various stakeholders, and selected actors, and occurs beyond the full glare of the public, at the Kambi level, so to speak, active citizenship is subject to what issues the media highlight as worthy of discussion. This includes what issues they select, how they frame and moderate them, i.e. the quality of the discourse, and more importantly, whether the discussions within the public sphere get considered within the privileged access policy sphere. My interest here is, why is a public discourse, especially about governance, getting so uninformed, but now hyper-partisan and uncritical? Why have party communicators become the yardstick through which policy positions of political parties get articulated, often incoherently without empirical data? Why has it become attractive to simply pitch two adversaries with irreconcilable party positions as panelists to discuss issues while a presenter only allocates time rather than moderate? Many factors account for this. But my substantive argument here is that such a setting, what I call the gratification of conflict and irreconcilable differences, is typically polluted by opinions, incendiary language, and uncritical fellowship. Such situations generate what we'll call simultaneous monologue and it remains antithetical to true conversation. Even when public intellectuals are invited to contribute into such programs, the program formats are so unsuitable that little impact is made. Caught between the existential threat of abusive language by parties who are callers and their benefactors, and the thankless job of being derided and ridiculed, many knowledgeable subjects who could perform the function of public intellectuals have chosen to keep mute and look on. At best, they choose to make their positions known on platforms that are not mass, but specialized, including inaugural lectures, policy papers, journal articles, opinion pieces, and sometimes on specialized social media platforms. I'm arguing that the media has the sacred duty of creating an enabling environment for all, including those who hold uncomfortable social positions. It should look out particularly for knowledgeable subjects with something to say, to step up to the table to contribute their knowledge. The media should partner such public intellectuals in a way that supports them to disseminate their knowledge in an easy to understand and digest language for a mass audience. This is a critical part of the puzzle, the ability to massify specialized knowledge. The key to achieving this is through a collaboration between the public intellectual and the media, through a careful selection of subject matter, program format and moderation, and how such content gets repurposed in other media, especially social media, for mass dissemination. So rather than increase the decibels of the current Tower of Babel, which characterizes our media, media programs should aim at providing public intellectuals with the space, the instruments, and the enabling environment to articulate and share their knowledge with the public in ways that inform and frame critical social issues of our time. Media should even encourage uncomfortable and unpopular views and subject them to rigorous analysis and test, because this is how societies expand their horizons and undergo transformation. The media should be also cognizant of the fact that institutions could also perform the functions of public intellectuals by virtue of their depth of specialized knowledge and their vision to uplift society through enlightenment. So you can take the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, the universities, think tanks, special knowledge, CSOs. They must all be encouraged to actively participate in public discourse with the intention to impact public policy. But as Bennett and Herman rightly point out, a policy sphere that fails to consider outcomes of a deliberative public sphere fails a critical test. In view of this, I'm proposing that there should be clear pathways through formal, that is public, and informal, private routes for such knowledge to be harnessed and considered at the privileged access policy table. If politicians and policymakers are honest about their policy or social interactions, and such encounters are not instrumental by nature, and by I mean they are not guided to achieve specific outcomes, they will be acting like Oedipus did to Tiresias, inviting public intellectuals to the policy table at both privileged and open access sites, because they have something substantive to say, not because they are friendly or uncritical voices. I'm looking forward to the day when intellectually diverse and vibrant social media platforms, such as the Writers Cafe of Ghana, which I belong, a social media platform for the Ghana Association of Writers, or the Communication Educators Association of Ghana, will take it upon themselves to select, debate, and articulate a policy position on, say, the broadcasting bill, public funding for state-owned media, on how digital migration and convergence could alter our media experience. And beyond table it as a policy position to government, also vigorously advocate for its public debate and implementation. Many renowned Ghanaian statesmen with remarkable achievements have expressed consternation about how theirs and other critical public pronouncements have been received with partisan hostility. Professor Kwesi in particular has asked for decorum in our public discourse and called for more inclusiveness in public discourse and policy formulation. Sir Sam Jonah, Mr. Kwame Pinim, and a few others are abiding examples of this regrettable phenomenon of how intolerance and name-calling almost invariably visit critical voices that dare to go against the grain of dominant political discourse. We must not only encourage critical public interest debate at the policy formulation level, we should even at the kambi level of daily social interactions strive to create a critical culture of close interrogation of facts and pronouncements of speakers within such communicative spaces. That is what differentiates a deliberative democracy from a moralizing democracy. Rule of law from institutional arbitrariness. Let me conclude the same way I started, by invoking a literary example. Aristotle argues that the twin feelings of pity and fear that a spectator experiences after watching a tragedy comes about because the punishment of the tragic hero, who is often of a very high social standing, evokes fear in the ordinary spectator. Because, of course, the ordinary spectator will be asking, if somebody of high social standing can be reduced to rubble by the gods, then what will happen to me, an ordinary man? But it also evokes pity in the sense that the punishment the tragic hero suffers is often disproportionate to the offense committed. So let's say Oedipus, the king of Thebes, plucks his eyes and is led into the wilderness after learning that he indeed had killed his father and married his mother as Tiresias had prophesied. I conclude by asking you that if the high and noble statesmen within our society, with intellectual, political, economic, and social capitals, are taken to the cleaners for voicing critical alternative views, what do you think could happen to the low-level public intellectual whose only recompense and protection is the truth he or she projects through his knowledge? I'm at this point not merely asking, where are our public intellectuals? I'm inviting them to step up to the policy table, knowing that they might never be called to it otherwise. And like Tiresias, expand our social frontiers through shared knowledge and enlightenment. Lastly, I devote this reflection to Professor P.A. Viansa, whose deep insights into our daily lives serve as a prime example of how a public intellectual can, through his writings, debate, denounce, deconstruct, be humorous, or even go to town if he's sufficiently provoked. Needless to say, we need more of his kind. Samson, thanks for your time.
We owe you a lot of thanks. Thank you so very much, Dr. Kwame Akufo-Addo, on where are our public intellectuals? Where are our public intellectuals? So much for the media also to chew on. And of course, you know where he's coming from. We take a break. When we return, we'll be hearing from Professor A.C. Sutherland Ade, Ernesto Yeboah, Lamnatu Adam. We have Kweku Ando Awoche, Afia Agbenyo, and Dr. Abu Sakara Foster. Yakubu Ibn Chambers sends a message. He says, I'm in and I'm in love with this Joy Change series already. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is your Joy Change Speakers series. We trust that through this process, instead of the usual banter that we engage in on the show, you will relax, reflect as you listen, and for those duty bearers, you will begin to take the most important notes to recognize what the citizens demand of you by way of leadership. Professor A.C. Sutherland Ade. She's going to talk to us about the toxic cultures of contemporary Ghana, building upon legacies, the opportunities for a rapid transformation. Let's hear from the celebrated Pan-Africanist. Prof, thank you very much, and let's hear you. Please unmute your mic.
Me now.
Yes, we can hear you very clearly.
Thank you very, very much. I have to say that it's an overwhelming privilege to have been given the opportunity to just talk about the things that are on one's chest on a forum like this. And I want to thank Joy, and also to thank you for deeming me somebody that should be given that privilege. So the nature of my presentation, it's going to be a bit eclectic, so please bear with me. Also, you'll find that I have, the previous speakers have said a lot of what I wanted to say, and so eloquently, so I'll just add a few things on some of those issues before turning to those which may not have been touched upon. I want to say that I want to call out some of the toxic cultures that have developed around key spheres of public life, which I believe threaten to undermine the real advancement towards the goals of a free and just society. And the second point I want to make generally is that I want to make a plea for the ownership of our legacies as a key to the transformations that we require. And in that process, I'm also looking at my generation and our handling of the responsibilities of building upon the efforts of the independence generation, which was just ahead of us. So if we look at culture as sustained and marked behavior of a society which is generational, and culture as our identity, we want to begin to wonder what is our culture and what is our identity. It's certainly not a monolithic thing. It's certainly a complex one. But I would want to agree with Professor Prempe, Ms. Jigonuku, for the points that they made about governance, because I think that that's one of the most toxic areas of the development of culture, which we need to stop and take a look at. There's no time to go into the legacies of colonialism and the encounter with Europe, but perhaps there will be other platforms on which to discuss the need to be conscious of how severely we have been impacted by that encounter and how it has affected areas such as governance. Many people, feel that we are beyond, colonialism and so on, but I'm afraid that the impact has been extremely deep-seated, and we need to take a look at that. I also want to pick a truism developed by Professor Georgie Chikata in her inaugural address last week, to the effect that there are many Ghanas which we ignore at the national level to our peril. So if we take Ghana, looking at it, we are still communal in nature. Our traditional leaders help us to maintain law and order and are essential in the settlement of non-criminal civil disputes, for example, decisions in communities regarding peacekeeping, conflict resolution, and matters that relate to social issues such as health, community welfare, and many others are placed under the guidance of traditional authorities at the local level. However, we also know that chieftaincy is one of the core blocks of Ghana's culture, in which should preserve our rich culture values and communality, and such principles as reciprocity, hospitality, and citizenry. But we know that it has suffered from some of the most grievous distortions, especially dating from the colonial period, leading to the emerging reality that while these leaders sustain community unity, on the one hand, it is also a source of communal strife around matters of succession and land use. And I want to say Sebe Tafrache to my elders, that some of these things have to be put on the table, because it's an institution that the people look up to, and which must therefore be able to stand toll in supporting those aspects of our culture, which will keep us going forward. So communal Ghana evolves in spite of, rather than because of, national systems and structures which are supposedly set up to support them. And there's a lot that must be done to keep the people at the center of national governance systems. And I think, Nana Akufo has also talked about that. Now, one of my greatest concerns, which seems to be the concern of many of our speakers, is the culture of national governance that has evolved, and especially if we take the last 30 years, of the fourth Republican Constitution, where we opted for multi-party democracy. It's an aspiration to entrench the democratic principles within the framework of constitutional rule, as we've been told. But and we can be proud of an unbroken process of elections handing over, power from one political tendency to another. But is the duopoly and the normalization of monetization of elections, state capture, a parliament which has shown its potential for greatness but is imploding on itself. Are these the characteristics of a national governance system that we as a people would want? Are we as a people not reduced to watching a contest within a small group of people whose aim is to hold on to power for their own benefit with little accountability to the people? Is this the Ghana we bargained for? Is this the Ghana that our people, our elders fought for, as Amu says in Yenara Assassini? A related area of this toxicity is the consistent disruption of systems in the public sector every time there's a change of government, so that no solid institutional memory is sustained, systems are not allowed to work. So changing an entire board membership and all the senior executives every 4 years, for example, is taking out of their hand the prerogative to manage an orderly and regulated system and to entrench an orderly and regulated system. And this certainly is not serving us well. There's also what I call the cancel culture. I know this is not what those who use it normally use it for, but I call a council, I'm using it, to talk about the idea of the fact that we are not, as a matter of fact, looking at, the regulatory framework and the legal framework that we are putting together, such that we are piling on rules, laws, regulations, which end up in conflict with each other, and in the end create a stasis or cancel each other out. So if you take the cultural sector, which I'm better acquainted with, after the setting up of the National Commission on Culture under the presidency, PNDC Law 238, ministries were later established above the commission. Institutions like the National Theatre, which were under the purview of the National Commission, now were allowed to amend their laws. Now we have the creative arts industry. And what we have now is a morass of laws and institutions which don't know how to relate to each other. Now, the point is that who is doing the necessary and painstaking work of weighing and recalibrating the impact of piling legal and supervisory entities on each other generally, and making it difficult for the system to work? And I'm sure that this is not just happening in the area of culture. It's happening in so many areas. If we think about medium, small, and small scale businesses, and the fact that they seem to be sinking in the face of tax regimes and prohibitive interest rates. We have the situation that's happening with grains and so on, where we are supposed to be processing them here, and then we've given permission for people to export them, and it's somehow timing, synchronization, and so on. The absence of a good view on this, and regulating this is getting us to really sink. And this I don't even talk about it being what is worsening, it being the appalling cultures of corruption. Now, one of the things that really terrifies me is the ease with which we cede control of our precious resources. It is as if the last 500 years never happened. It is as if we don't know that our people were sold to build up Europe and America. It is as if we don't know that our gold has been taken from under our feet on terms that are not favorable to us. It is as if we are not aware that our land is currently being bought by foreigners and then resold to us. It is as if we are not aware that our indigenous knowledge, arts, and philosophies cultivated over years are being taken without supervising how we interact with other peoples regarding these very, very precious knowledge systems. And we are not also looking at how they are constantly being used to serve Europe, America, China over the centuries and even up to today. So when are we going to systematically and strategically put a value on each of these resources to stop the horrible hemorrhage? Value being put on our resources. People are not coming here because they love us, and they come here because we have resources that they think will be useful to them. Why we don't recognize the importance of these resources is what is really terrifying to me, because many of them are not retrievable, they're not replaceable, and they put us in, God forbid, a really tenuous position as we go into the future. Now, I want to just raise a few other issues. One of them is the fact that our social fabric, it has been very seriously affected by the approach that we have taken. What have our people become? How have their values and the social fabric been distorted and compromised in the process that we have talked about? Has commoditization and transactionality become our identity, an identity of self-denigration, so that we don't even see any strengths? This is Ghana, nothing works here. And it is tough to hear young people say, "Mommy, these days it's money and nothing else." What is it that has gone wrong with our parenting and nurturing? What has gone wrong with our religious institutions, that we are not able to nurture persons who have a sense of pride, have a sense of integrity, and yet program after program, doctrine after doctrine, we see being advertised and being carried out within our religious institutions. What is happening there? And as parents, why is it that we feel that our children should become faded copies of superficial Europe and America? It's sad to see parents failing to transmit fully our own knowledge that has been passed on to us. And many of us are multilingual, and we turn our children into monolingual children. We pay loads of money to alienate our children from our culture. We have young minds being molded in nursery schools and by electronic media with iconographies which sit with them for the rest of their lives. So Mickey Mouse, Snow White, and so on. And even in poor communities, they do not know their own heroes. They do not have an idea of the African imaginary and the African reality. Now, this is a terrible travesty, and this is why I believe that any person in position of responsibility must have the capacity to recognize our resources and should not be willingly or willfully contributing to the dissipation of these resources. I might, the way I sound, I might be counted among Afro pessimists or Ghana pessimists, those who have given up. But I want to say that for the remaining time, I want to acknowledge those who have kept the flame burning, those who are innovating faster than we even can keep pace with. If Ghanaians were total cynics, the way I sounded before, why would there have been a palpable wave of relief and hope when COP Dr. Dampare was made IGP? It means that right at at our base, we crave for integrity, we crave for a system that works. I want to appreciate the culture of civil consciousness that continues to be molded through the work of civil society groups and also among the citizenry. If for nothing at all, just a few days ago, the surge of well-articulated demand for accountability regarding plans for the Ashtimota forest speaks to this. Of course, this must be tried and tested if the need arose to persistently battle for it. But I want to appreciate that. I want to appreciate every single individual who wakes up in the morning to put in an honest day's work. And there are millions of Ghanaians who do this every day. This is one of the most important tenets of our cultural heritage, and I want to appreciate that. I want to appreciate everyone who works in an official position and has not extorted money or other favors, including sexual, from members of the public. I'm privileged to have been in public service, and I know that I myself and others have been capable of holding these offices with integrity. I don't buy into the idea that people cannot be fair, cannot work with integrity. What we have to do is unearth these stories and share them, and share the fact that in doing this, one remains with a sense of freedom and peace of mind, and with a capacity to interact with our society. I want to appreciate all those who are researching and documenting our intellectual heritage, our knowledge, indigenous knowledge, resources, and ways of life. I also want to appreciate those who are exploring technology to promote an interest in Ghana, vloggers, YouTubers, those who are going to the trouble of seeking and putting together information on language, on food, on natural environment, on performance, on the arts, on the return of the diaspora. These are people whose work should be moved up into a level where it's officially recognized.
Thank you.
I want also to appreciate those recognized as who embrace the total range of resources from home and abroad. So to end, my recommendations are that we cannot just throw money at our problems. Where we are today, we must have a people who are inspired. Without an inspired people, we are not going to make any difference. We are going to sink into a morass of self-denigration. And therefore, telling the story which strengthens us, which recognizes us, which acknowledges us and our whole family from community level to national level to the African level across the diaspora, our whole story of resistance, of enterprise, of worth across time and space. People like Nana telling the story of Asameni of the Akwamu, of Nani of the Maroons, Priscilla Mante, the neuropharmacist, Letitia Bing, our zoologist, Professor Konote Ahulu, and so on.
Right.
We must tell those stories.
Thank you.
And that, for me, including that and the harmonization of our policies, laws, and institutions. And finally, I would like to say that if we do not turn to an alternative path of the economy, and I'm suggesting that culture would be one of those alternative paths, we probably are not going to make it. And therefore, that idea of transformational thinking must take a hold of our minds and must drive us as we move forward. Thank you very much, Ladi.
We are extremely thankful to you. And our audiences, please be reminded that this recording is available on YouTube. And this evening there'll be a rebroadcast this evening, and it's available on YouTube. You can play it for as often as you need to sink the message in. And many of you have just been sending messages of thanks to us, just saying thank you. Eric says, I love change speakers. Well done. Joy News. Ransford says, wonderful programming, very refreshing and away from the noise. Thank you so very much. Thank you also. Hanifa says, excellent program. I'm stimulated for action. We'll be right back. You're welcome back, and you have been tuned in to the Joy Change Speakers series. This is series number 2. Let's go straight away to a young man representing the youth. He's been at the forefront of a number of, call it, protests for what the youth demand. Ernesto Yeboah is leader, Economic Fighters League. Thank you for joining us, Ernesto.
Thank you very much, Samson, and a very good morning to your viewers and listeners. Samson, we've been at this journey for about 20 years now. And in all these 20 years, we've been asking ourselves very fundamental questions. Questions as to what kind of society do we want? What kind of system would bring about that society that we so much yearn for? And as we have been at this, we came to no other conclusion that we ought to look at our laws. Some of the questions that arise are the fact that where are our laws coming from? And so you take the example of the Plant Breeders Bill. And when you read the Plant Breeders Bill of Chile, of Taiwan, of Japan, of all the other countries where they have been tabled, including that of Ghana, very little changes. And so we ask ourselves, where are our laws coming from? Laws coming from, are they rooted in, African philosophy, for instance? Are they coming from us? These are, for us, questions that we may want to go into, in the near future, but for the lack of time. Now, you take the idea of corruption, fighting corruption, and we'll talk a lot about it. We'll do this. But more often than not, they are not practical, because the ideas only suggest that we are going to deal with the individual, when we all know that corruption has social implications. So if it has social implications, and African etymology or African philosophy suggests to us that when a man or a woman misconduct himself or herself, the shame does not come to just the man alone or the woman alone, but it comes to the family. Where do we find this line, this streak of social philosophy in the African setting in our laws? And so one of the things that the Economic Fighters League will do will be to impose what we call the thief tax, where when a man is said to have stolen from us, we don't waste our money by accommodating that person in prison and feeding that person and catering for the medical expenses of that person. We are not going to do that. What we seek to do is to let that person live within the society and face the social shame thereof. But it is not just him going to repay our monies, to us. It is also going to be imposed on the family members and beneficiaries, including the churches they attend, or the mosque or religious settings that they find themselves in. So, in our calls for a new constitution, one of the subject matters that hasn't come up, which is framed in a question, is, so what do you want to see in that new constitution? Today, we want to present just one of the things that we want to see in that new constitution. And we are talking about proportional representation. We believe that there is a winner-takes-all problem in our politics, and it has been suggested many times. And because there is a winner-takes-all problem in our politics, it has led to what we call the politics of exclusion. The vast majority of our people are not engaged in the politics of our country. Now, this is what we are presenting as the solution. And we are looking at proportional representation in the light that it identifies three very important, and that is not to say the rest are not, but these are more or less in a majority. We are talking about women, we are talking about youth, we are talking about people who belong to the physically challenged community, and those also within the brackets of the professional class whose ideas and involvement may be very necessary in legislation and yet are nowhere to be found in our politics. Okay, so what is proportional representation? It's basically an electoral system where parties are represented in decision-making proportionate to the percentage of votes they get at the national level. So if we want to use the 2020 electoral results as an example, the MPP secured 51% nationally. What it means is that currently they have 137 seats in parliament. What it would mean is that they would have 141 seats in parliament under a proportional representation system. The NDC that had 47%, currently with 137 seats in parliament, would have had 130 seats in parliament. And this country would have had the benefit of the likes of GUM, who would have been represented with 2 seats in parliament. So in all the brouhaha going on, all the noise, in all the conversations happening in parliament, the tensions and all of that, Ghanaians would have had the opportunity to hear what GUM is saying. But because of the current system we are practicing, we do not have the benefit of their voice. Now, proportional representation is very flexible, such that many countries adapt it to their particular circumstances. So if you go to the likes of Denmark, South Africa, Germany, Rwanda, they have their own type of proportional representation. And we believe that here in Ghana, we can have our own type of proportional representation. Now, if you take a look at the population demography, men, women constitute about 50.7% of the entire population, and men constitute 49.3% of the entire population, which simply tells you that women are more than men in this country. And yet when it comes to the decision-making table, women are almost nowhere to be found. It's quite surprising, Samson, that quite a significant number of gender advocates or activists aren't talking about proportional representation. They are instead talking about affirmative action. Now, by proportional representation, we are breaking the hands of patriarchy, which is what the gender activism is all about. It's about breaking the hands of patriarchy and establishing a system which is fundamentally equal for all who live in it. We are also looking at the other constituency. We are talking about youth, who also constitute a majority in a society, and yet are nowhere to be found in decision making. Today, ask yourself, what roles do young people and women play in our politics? They are cheerleaders. cheerleaders, wait until election time, get them T-shirts, and unfortunately, I mean, for women, they are simply sexualized. It becomes a back raise than a raise of the mind and ideas in contribution to what must change and what must be retained. So now, there are some who have raised the idea of possible dangers in a system like this. They have said that it can lead to unstable government. And this is why we bring in what we call the proportional representation that can be tailored for Ghana's own. One of the things that we are looking at, for instance, is that this proportional representation should happen at the parliamentary level. At the presidential level, look, we even advocate that the 50% plus one that has to be secured under our current system of first past the post should be scrapped to a simple majority. So it's the proportional representation does not happen at the executive level. It happens at the parliamentary level to give voice to our people. Now, why do we want proportional representation for Ghana? We want proportional representation for Ghana in order to promote the politics of inclusion. We want more women, we want more youth, we want our best and scarce brains. I don't think we are making a very good use of the likes of Kweku Baako and Kwesi Pratt in this country. We have reduced them to radio talks and television programs, and that's just it. But with proportional representation, these knowledgeable men and women we have in our society could have a place to, as it were, influence policy conversations and discussions and all of that. Proportional representation promotes a politics of conviction. How many of our men and women in politics are in there because of conviction and not because of their stomach or not because of, survival? This is what we are talking about. If we left the likes of Atiq Mohammed, very brilliant guy, yet, if we left the likes of Bernard Bonner, brilliant guy, yet, politics of conviction has its own place. And if we would allow for that kind of politics in our country, I believe that this country would be the better for it. Now, we also want to make the best use of our human resources, like I have already said. And then one of the things that we are looking at in this new constitution is to strip Parliament of parliamentary representation or constituency representation and just leave that to the DCs. If you want development in your constituency, go to your DC. They will construct the gutters, they will construct the roads, they will build the hospitals. Leave Parliament to represent their political parties. And in truth, if we want to be truthful with ourselves, our members of Parliament, do they speak to the concerns of their constituency or they speak to the concerns of their party? On e-levy, how many of them spoke on the concerns of their constituency? And if they did, e-levy would not have been passed. And so let us organize or have a system that allows, us to operate on the principle of honesty. And we believe that proportional representation is one of the ways by which we can do that. Now, the new constitution will be a development-led one. And proportional representation is a right system to galvanize the nation, towards it. We also want a change of the electoral system from first past the post to proportional representation, like we have said. We want and this is another idea, we want a second chamber. And by this second chamber, we want the collapse of the Council of State and the National House of Chiefs into this, second chamber. It's a lot of compromise. By ideological conscription, we don't even believe in that. But for the sake of our cohesion, we feel that the second chamber would bring all of these people on board. Right. Now, okay, so that's basically it. We've talked about the need for the proportional representation to happen just at the parliamentary level, right, so that we can have, the executive elected on simple majority.
Right. Ernesto Yeboah speaking on the courage to imagine. Can we at least take a step away from what we have practiced over this period without reaping the benefits? The courage to imagine. Ernesto Yeboah, leader, Economic Fighters League. He wanted to be able to speak to one issue in a way that leaves setting imprints. Now, we will go to the northern region, and we are joined by Lamnatu Adam, Executive Director of Sontaba, to speak to us on what is on her heart that something should be done about. She pursued development studies at the university and has been advocating improvement in education service delivery. She's the Executive Director of Sontaba, which literally translates, let's help one another. Sontaba is a women and children's rights advocacy organization based in the northern region. Please, let's hear you.
Good morning, Samson, and then good morning also to our listeners and viewers, as well as our other panelists. I must say something that I want to commend you and also your production team for your interest in inclusivity, and for that matter, ensuring that there is gender, consideration in your programming. And let me say that I listen with great interest, and I am learning a lot from the other great speakers. But before I talk about the issues of gender vulnerability and social protection, I want to quickly make a few comments on my observation in this Ramadan. And it's towards the contribution of religion. I have seen that in this Ramadan, there is an increase in the, sensitization and general sermons around the protection of women and the vulnerable. And I think that it calls for commendation, as you might have heard, Madam A.C. Sutherland, and for that matter, Mr. Kofi Akwa, all bringing in the issues of religion. And this observation for me, I think, will call for us to collaborate more with religion, to see how they can use their space to further, push towards getting women the emancipation that we need. Nonetheless, I would like to talk briefly about women or gender vulnerability and social protection in the eyes of our current happenings with our economy. Samson, you know that women are, almost half of our human population. And yet we get to suffer the gross inequality gaps, either in income or human capital and the like. If you look at sub-Saharan Africa, women face deeply rooted obstacles to achieving their potential at work and also in other aspects of life. However, evidence suggests that persistent gender inequality affects women, and it will impede, economic and social progress in our development. I'm bringing all of this so that we can appreciate, how, whichever way the economy is, how it's likely to hit women either negatively or otherwise. And because I'm coming from the North, I would want to talk about women farmers who significantly have less access to and control over and ownership of land and other productive assets, compared to their male counterpart. Land perhaps is the most important economic asset, and women account for just about 12.8% of this agricultural, inputs. Of course, you can understand from where we are coming, we have issues of male dominance and patriarchy. And so discriminatory gender and social norms, limit access to women having, access to productive resources. Now, with the current happenings with our economy, where we have high inflation, coupled with arbitrary increase in goods and services, especially food, it's also greatly affecting women and other vulnerable groups. We have had increase in, farming input. For example, when you take a market survey of the farm input that we have, talk about plowing, talk about surrogate, talk about fertilizer, you would see that there's about 87% price change from last year, from what we have from last year to this year. And even if you take the cost of a bag of maize, which is our staple, it's about 300 Ghana cedi. And how does that translate and impact on women? And for that matter, people with very large family size. From where I come from, women are particularly those who should do whatever that they can to make sure that the bag of corn that is being placed to you, you do whatever you have to do in order to make sure that it becomes a meal. Now, how are women burdened in this? Especially now that we do not have vibrant national economy to withstand the shock. We are just recovering from COVID. And we all woke up to see what COVID did to us. And yet, we are not making effort in making sure that we are learning from COVID. Now, a lot of the reasons for our current happening is blame on the Ukraine, Ukraine war. And what are we then learning? Because whether we like it or not, it has effect on fertilizer, it has effect on fuel, and also maybe wheat, which we also somehow consume. Now farming season have started. I don't know what programs are there yet, but even fertilizer is not very much accessible for now. Now, how does this trend of economic hardship also affect gender and vulnerability? We've noticed that only people with voices and representation are heard, as we've seen in the industrial strike, as we've seen in unions asking for increase in salary, asking for increase in ways that will make them comfortable enough to absorb this shock. What about the less privileged? I have been asking. What about the rural women with diversified needs? Women who are pregnant, women who are single-headed households, who have a lot of children to feed by themselves. How about people with disability and the excluded? If all of these people are this hard hit, how about my women who are excluded and are living in alleged witches' camps, who have been forgotten for ages? How are they managing the situation? And I think that this calls for us all to, as a matter of agency, to enact, in fact, a very universal social protection program that are adequately funded and that will benefit mainly the poorest people. And I've been asking, I know the social protection bill has been there. What has happening to it? What's happening to it? And I think that it should be a matter of priority. Each passage should be a matter of priority. I know that governments have taken 3 months or less to ensure that the laws that they want to see it happens. So I've been asking, is it that this country is not interested in the excluded? Is not interested in bridging the gender gap? Because if not, women's rights organizations have been calling for the passage of the affirmative action bill. We've also been calling for government to, look again. If we need to retable, the social protection bill, we need, as a matter of agency, to pass that. And then I also want to challenge the media and, of course, the civil society to get and hype stories of how the economic impact is hitting, the citizenry, especially our rural folks. And I want to ask the media to also create spaces for the citizens to, actively participate in issues of our national discourse. And that's why I commend this program, Samson, that it's a very splendid program that will allow other people to bring their views and to help all those of us who are in power to put things right. And then also looking at the fact that issues that are confronting women are quite deep-seated, they are quite systemic. We need to also build partnership. And it's one of my asks that we need to build partnership with our religious and traditional authorities towards changing these deep-seated cultural, bottlenecks that impedes the overall growth of our women. And I want to end by saying that we need an agent response to support rural communities, because we know that rural communities, there's nothing else they do except farming. And with this high cost of input, I barely don't know how we can survive that. If a bag of maize is already selling at 300 cedi, and with our northern sector, which is mostly rain-fed, and our traditional method of farming, coupled with our traditional method of farming, and the high cost of input, we are watching and looking at a very scary, issue of food insecurity coming up next year. Thank you very much. These are my submissions in looking at gender vulnerability and social protection in the eyes of our current happenings with our economy.
Thank you very much, Lamnatu Adam. Lamnatu Adam is the Executive Director of Suntaba, which literally translates, let's help one another. And her focus in the Northern region by this group has been women and children's rights advocacy, among other issues, affecting more particularly marginalized persons. Right. Now, we will go to hear from a man who has spent over 30 years managing various organizations, national and multinational, including the Volta River Authority, Tallow Oil, and Ashanti Goldfields Company. He's the immediate past managing director of Tallow Oil Ghana Limited and executive vice president of Tallow Oil PLC. He's been on several boards and now chairs boards, including that of the UBA Ghana. You're still here on Newsfile, and this is a Joy Change Speakers Series 2. Let's welcome Kweku Ando Awoche. Let's hear you say. Please unmute your mic.
Good morning, Samson.
Thank you very much. We are so privileged to have you.
Good morning again, and good morning, viewers. Thank you for the invitation, and I think I've heard some very enlightening and powerful presentations from my colleagues.
We should be thanking you.
Let me start as follows. So from where I sit and the experience I've had, there is no question in my mind that the country is in need of constitutional reform. There is no question in my mind that the current two-party system is not yielding the benefits that we all, effectively two-party system, even though we have provision for other smaller parties, is not yielding the benefits that we all hoped for back in 1992 when the Constitution was first put together. And why do I say that? In some respects, we've heard a lot of the reasons why. I thought Kwesi Prempeh's presentation in particular was very, very broad in helping us understand. But clearly, my perspective is that there is too much power vested in the executive. And that goes all the way down to the district. We talked about district elections. The president has the power to appoint many of the senior members of the legislature, has the power to appoint boards of state-owned enterprises. And this system we have effectively where it's a winner-take-all pretty much means that we have a 4 to 8 year cycle of political management. What I also believe and what I see is that our political managers are the same as our economic managers. We have a situation where our private sector is not particularly big. Most small businesses will tell you how difficult it is to access credit in this country. Interest rates are very high. So we, over the years, have not built up the kind of private sector that we need to basically power the economy forward. And we have a government with all these state-owned enterprises that runs a lot of our key areas. A lot of these organizations tend to be bloated. They're not particularly efficient, and they're not generating the kind of outcomes that we need to see for the benefit of the country. This is certainly my view. And all of that for me goes back to the kind of institutional and constitutional framework that we have basically had in place for the last 30 years.
Okay, so do we have his streaming? It looks like there's a bit of a problem with his internet, but Kweku Ando Awoche is speaking on the political space. He appears to just be done with that. So he's going to talk about energy and economic management. You know, these are his areas of comfort. Do we have his line stable now? Okay, so we will try and get his line stabilized so that we can bring him back. Thank you so much. We have you back.
Okay, good. Hopefully it's a bit better now. Is it a bit better?
It is.
Very good. Okay. So hopefully you heard my introductory comments.
That is so.
So the gist of it for me is that we are caught in these 4 to 8 year political cycles, which we're all very familiar with. What really aggravates the situation for many of us who work in the economy is that our political managers are effectively the same as our economic managers. We have a small private sector, and whether you look at the petroleum industry, the electricity industry, the insurance industry, many of these companies are dominated by state-owned institutions that are also appointed by our political managers. So effectively what we have is also a very short-term economic management view. And that is why the road from Accra to Cape Coast is the same road we've had for the last 40 years. That is why the road to Kumasi is the same road we've had for the last 40 years. We cannot, it seems it's very difficult for us to think long-term and to execute long-term. A few years back, we tried through the National Development Planning Commission to put together a 40-year plan. It didn't go anywhere for various reasons. And, when our parties come into power and they give lip service to this idea of a long-term plan, it is quickly abandoned for the various short-term parochial interests that we tend to have. So let me just take 2 examples in spaces that I'm familiar with, just to make the point. Let's talk about energy for a minute, electricity. So, lately, many people have been complaining that there's doomsday, even though there's really not doomsday. There's a lot of problems in the transmission and distribution space. And then, of course, the SOEs have presented tariff increases of over 100% in certain cases. What I found particularly interesting this week rather, was a headline in the Business and Financial Times where the head of the IPP industry was saying the industry or the IPPs were owed close to $1 billion in arrears of unmade payments. So you ask yourself, so from a certain point of view, things are okay. Ghana has an installed capacity of over 5,000 megawatts. If you look through the reports, actually only about 4,000 are available. And already we are using somewhere between 150 to 200 megawatts a year in terms of new or using up that capacity we have. What does that mean? It means that in 3 to 4 years' time, we will be over 4,000 megawatts. And if we don't sign new capacity, we will really get the doomsday that we all are so worried about. Now, what are the plans that this government is making to avert that? If we have the IPPs, the private sector saying that I am owed $900 million, as was reported this week, what investor is going to come in and invest in the company, in the country, invest $500, $600, $700 million when he has no assurance that he will get his money back, has no assurance that those arrears will be paid? How does that relate to a need for a much longer term planning for the things that we do? The fact of the matter is, many of these issues, the reasons for these arrears are longstanding. They didn't just happen yesterday. If I were to look through the reports of the Electricity Company of Ghana, for instance, or NEDCO under VRA, you will see that their losses, what we call their technical and commercial losses, are over 20%. When you add the collection issues they face, they're over 30%. Now, guess what? 15 years ago, it was exactly the same. So you have to ask yourself, what progress have we made in those last 15 years to actually bring those losses down, to make the sector efficient? And why is it that these institutions come back to the public and basically say, you've got to give me 100% increase? You're effectively paying for my inefficiencies. And the point really here is lacking that long-term view of how we properly address some of these issues means we're always focusing on the 4 to 8 year cycle. And it is not allowing us to really address the long-term issues that are still with us 10, 15, 20, 40 years on. Economic management of the state is short-term in line with the political management. And that is why, in my view, we are in dire need of that constitutional reform to really think through why we give so much power to the ruling party. Let's talk about the economy for a minute. I think many of us will acknowledge that these are challenging times.
Extremely.
Interest rate as of March, 24%. Inflation as of March, 24%, 23.6 to be exact. We had the monetary policy rate go up 17%. It may go up some more very shortly. And when I look back in time, in history, the last time we had those kinds of inflation rates was almost 20 years ago. So now we know that there are reasons for this. We know that the COVID was a big shock to us. We know that the Ukraine-Russian war is a big shock to supply chains. The real question is, are we as a country, how are we managing those shocks? It's not so much whether the shock has occurred, it's how are we managing? Do we have the resilience? Do we have the coherence? Do we have the governance capacity to manage those shocks in a way that some other countries are managing better than we are? And again, for me, it comes back to what are those long-term fundamental frameworks we have in place to build that governance capacity, to build that internal coherence, to build that greater resilience, so that inflation isn't 24%. When you read the media and you hear that UK is at a 40-year high, inflation is 9%, and the sky is falling, what does the man and woman on the street do when inflation is 24%, interest rates are over 20%? How does that person manage their business? Now, you may think that it doesn't connect back to the Constitution. It doesn't connect back to the need for accountability of our political managers. It doesn't account for the sort of the asymmetric power that our leaders have, but it does. Because if we're not able to challenge, question, put in place long-term solutions to our problems, if every 4 to 8 years they change, we will be going in cycles. And that is my submission. We need constitutional reform to effectively rebalance the power that is currently inherent in the two-party system.
Very revealing. Thank you so very much, Kweku Ando Awoche. And one thing that is becoming quite clear to me is that even the people I didn't expect to speak to the Constitution and talk about need for a change are talking about the Constitution. Anyways, thank you so very much, sir. Now, we will proceed to our very last, two last speakers, change speakers. And want to thank all of you. Your messages have been coming in very thick. Unfortunately, we are not able to read messages on this edition. And for those of you, I need to remind you that this recording is available on YouTube shortly after the show is over.
What's your name again?
So you can listen as often or as many times as you want. The same is the first edition that was held on the 15th of January. Papa Cole says that really enjoying this type of show, the movement away from the asinine politics, the holding up of the mirror to ourselves across various spheres, the diversity and varied backgrounds of the contributors, the all-encompassing angles. That's the way to go. Good. Joy Newsfile production team. Thank you very much for those messages. KB says that, thank you so much for such a great program. I hope this will prick the conscience of all of us. It has to. And it must prick our conscience as to what we must do. Public discourses from today should be elevated from this weak and abusive political noise to one that will transform our way of life. I cannot thank you enough. May God bless you and the team at Joy News. Thank you all so very much. I'll take one more. This is from Atapuku Callings, and he says that we need such production and not the usual partisan banter on our airwaves. I'm indeed lifted today. Thank you. That's what we sought to do. Now, let's get to our next change speaker. And she is Afi Agbenyo. And many of you didn't know she's Afi Emelia Agbenyo. She has 2 master's degrees in research and development and educational leadership. So she has dedicated her life to social impact and inclusive development, gender transformation, TVET skills development, and she does development communication. Afi, thank you so very much for making time to join us.
Thank you, Samson, and thank you for the invitation to do this. The theme I chose out of the big conversation is that governance standards are in free fall, and I have fears that we will normalize it. And the thoughts I will share on these are not really new. They are the sentiments of a lot of us that I am putting together. I say so also because I sample thoughts from many people from diverse backgrounds to put this together. I have few words for government, especially on the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection, and a couple of words also for our press freedom ratings. People my age have lived long enough to witness 4 government transitions, at least in Ghana. And apart from violent free elections, citizens hope that each transition will offer better living standards, reduce poverty levels, and also reduce inequality. We hope for improvement in access and quality of education. We hope that there's an improvement in public infrastructure. We hope that basic amenities like water and electricity will be delivered. We hope that government will implement strategies that will engender the creation of decent jobs and working conditions. The Ghanaian people hardly ask for much. We barely ask for much. We ask for the barest minimum, in my opinion. Our young people are willing to work. They only expect a friendly labor market and humane tax regimes to support them, especially those venturing into entrepreneurship. In 2016, we transitioned with so much hope sold to us in flowery languages. We have the men. I'm sure most of us remember these languages. We are here to deliver world-class governance. I was really impressed by that statement. I can remember where I was sitting when I heard that. We are in a hurry. We are in a hurry got us to also accommodate the huge numbers that we got as ministers. We're willing to accommodate all that because we are in a hurry. The current government enjoy the most goodwill from citizens. With lofty ideas captured in exciting slogans, they convinced all of us that they were right for the governance job. They promised to create jobs, I've mentioned that. But we're here. Income security was one of the promises. Respect for human rights also was one of the promises. People had dreams rekindled in their hearts to see a Ghana where everyone has equal opportunity to flourish. A state where inequality is fought head on. And a just place where all of us thrive in liberty. Today, not only are such dreams dimmed, unfortunately, many people are giving up on ever witnessing a better Ghana. The standard of governance, as I mentioned, is in free fall, with little or no guarantee for upholding freedom of speech and association, no protection against political party-sponsored attacks. There's a total lack of respect for inclusion and citizen participation, in my opinion. Our governance architecture today is making nonsense of who a citizen is. We are subtly developing a class system where some people's voices matter more than others. I think this is an affront to our democracy, especially when we are participating, when we are practicing participatory development, democracy, if I can put it that way. The management of public institutions are handed over to people like birthrights. They step into these positions feeling entitled to champagne lives. They disrespect long-serving public officials and times their system to their own benefits. They're not doing this to disrupt system for the good, no. They do this for their own benefit. More than ever, the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection is leaderless. With a caretaker minister who is undoubtedly overwhelmed by her own responsibilities. In such difficult times, which we all agree, all speakers have mentioned that times are difficult. The most vulnerable of us, the most marginalized of us, require innovative interventions from government to survive. but there's no ministry taking care of that. The only time the minister's absence bothered the presidency was when the minister was needed as a parliamentarian to cast her vote for the e-levy bill to be passed. In actual fact, a levy that was even going to aggravate our situation. That's when she was needed. The affirmative action bill, as mentioned by Madam Lamatu, and I reiterate here, has not seen any significant progress over the years. In recent years, thrilling conversations have been championed by young people on gender discrimination, sexual exploitation, gender-based violence, reproductive health rights. We've even had issues on period tax, and this is where I want to commend one champion of period tax, Abel Delali, my very good friend, who's been giving me a lot of pressure these days. The ministry has failed to harness these renewed passions to advance gender and social transformation in Ghana. For instance, there have been topical domestic violence issues. There's been topical sexual harassment cases. These cases have been worthy of media attention, yet the ministry has been missing in action. As a country, the lack of shelter and limited access to justice for victims and survivors of sexual and gender-based violence continue to endanger the lives of vulnerable people. These and many others are what a ministry should be doing. They should be leading these charges, championing women and children's rights, and the social protection of the vulnerable. But who is making the case for the different ways in which unemployment impacts women and men? Who is demanding researched interventions to address the gender dynamics of unemployment, especially youth unemployment? Who is leading the charge to get women and young people at the decision table, where issues that concerns them are being discussed? It's as though the ministry does not exist, and that is unacceptable. Not enough has been done since the passage of the Domestic Workers Regulation either. Several international conventions to support women's right to work and to stay in jobs remain unratified by Parliament. There is no minister to lead that. As a matter of urgency, I think a substantive minister should be assigned with specific tasks and timelines. It's not acceptable. We will not do that to the Ministry of Finance. We will not do that to even the Office of the Chief of Staff. Why do we do that to such an important ministry? It's a precedent we do not want. Now, the quest for promoting decent jobs remain a lost battle. While technical and vocational education and training have experienced significant attention over the years, and I must commend the government in this regard, training to work transition remains a considerable challenge. We do not have a coordinated strategy to support learners' transition from training to work. Whether as self-employed or even persons to be employed, there's not a clear-cut strategy for this. Government job creation interventions and vehicles are scattered. They are not inclusive, and they are not coordinated. There is no directive for such interventions. I hope that the newly established TVET service, which is also something I want to commend government about, will provide policy direction to coordinate such interventions. Skills gap analysis that has been conducted by the Commission for TVET is a place to start from, and I commend the Commission for TVET also for taking such steps. Policies like the school feeding program, LEAP, our best policy, the free SHS, and other government cushion efforts are facing implementation challenges that could have been avoided. The reason, in my opinion, is that we have a government that does not have money. That is true. But most importantly, we have a government that implements public policies and interventions to shame so-called enemies instead of the common good. So their egos precede the common good. They will not listen to dissenting voices, not even that of experts. They label dissenting voices as their enemies. The human capital component of LEAP, for example, is not receiving the needed attention. This must be given the needed attention through an intersectoral approach, drawing experience from and resources, in my opinion, from agencies that are responsible for skills development and education, as well as relevant development and funding agencies. I was very surprised by government actors being surprised at our 2021 press freedom rating. Because really, you do not sit aloof, sit in WhatsApp platforms and have a good laugh, watch some party apparatchiks sit on social media and haul insults on every dissenting voice and be surprised at your press freedom ratings. You do not create an environment where party soldiers feel so powerful enough to threaten people, especially activists, with their jobs. You do not pretend to be surprised at your press freedom ratings when state institutions are used to frustrate young activists and expect to score high scores on press ratings. High-profile government spokespersons have dismissed the death of Ahmed Swali. Sadly so. They have also gone ahead to even ridicule death threats that journalists report. What is defined as the press has changed. So establishing TV stations, radio stations, and attempting to control traditional media spaces will not cover up for the bully and dangerous dissenting citizens' experience in this country. Many people who otherwise were passionate about governance and held governments accountable have resorted to self-censorship. I am not the only one saying this. Even the report is mentioning this. And this is so because they are disappointed. And also they are protecting their sanity, as well as for some, their lives. This is not good for democracy. The standard of governance is in free fall. And I am worried that this will be normalized. I am worried because we have a history of new governments comparing their records to old governments. So as the standards fall, our standard of measurement fall, and that is dangerous. They don't compare their records to even their own manifestos sometimes, let alone to best practices or what is excellence. I am worried about the falling governance standards because it leaves young people with no inspiration. It leaves us with no proper role models and no legacy to protect. Gone were the days when speeches of political leaders were spirited and inspire action in us. We cannot say same in recent years. There's a pervading lack of integrity. What political actors say in their speeches is not what they do. And so it does not cause us to want to move. Integrity matters. And political leadership in this country is leading the lack of integrity that is pervading us. But I am hopeful. I am hopeful not only in feelings, really, because I've come to the knowledge that hope is a strategy of desiring something better and working towards it. And so it is possible. And in this regard, I charge myself and all persons listening, especially those of us sitting on the fence, due to disappointment, those who are nearing despair about the Ghana project, to allow ourselves to feel hope. Let hope seep into our souls. Let it cause a stir in our spirit. And let it move us to some form of action, no matter how little, for a better Ghana. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. And that has been the presentation by Afia Agbenyo. And I believe that you continue to assimilate what you are hearing, even as you send us messages of thanks for a refreshing type of programming. And this we are committed to doing every quarter. We will move on to hear from our very last change speaker. And hopefully bring one of them back, the very first speaker, to do something special. But before that, let's take a quick break. You're still here with us on the Joy Change Speaker Series, and you have been listening to our speakers inspire us and seek to impact us, influence us, our thoughts and our conduct. And as some of you have been sending your messages and saying that the conscience of duty bearers are being pricked so that they'll sit up and do the right things. Let's now go to listen to the topic, Redefining Our Democracy for Accelerated Development, Constitutional Reforms Now, Looking Forward, Imperatives for Agriculture and Food. Very important to look at. And who is our next speaker? He's an agronomist and was the candidate of the Convention People's Party for the 2012 elections, during which he was described by many as winner of the presidential debate. He is chairman of Sackforce Holdings Limited and founder of the National Interest Movement. He has for a while now been pushing for constitutional change like Fix the Country is doing. Dr. Michael Abu Sakara Foster, thank you very much for making time to speak to us.
Thank you so much. And I must first of all congratulate you on this innovative program.
Thank you.
And giving voice to the many and the majority who are often silent, and perhaps in this program you can hear them speaking.
That's right.
Because people are not shouting over each other. And that has been one of my pleasant surprises here today, that I have enjoyed it so much. In fact, I want to congratulate you on that.
Thank you.
Not to mention our last speaker, who was so eloquent. She reminded me of somebody.
Yes. Dr. Abu Sakara says that Afi Agbenyon's presentation reminds him of Chimamanda. Right.
Yes. So, to the issue of redefining our democracy, I think throughout this morning, my task has been made easier because almost all the presenters, after making their presentations, have traced the source of our tribulations back to the Constitution. And I think for us in the national interest movement, this is a very important pivotal moment because it shows that persistence over a period of more than 6 years has brought the issue of constitutional reforms from the rear to the front, where it is now part of the national discourse. And so many actors are joining hands to push for what we are asking for now, which is a referendum before the next election. And the circumstances demand this, both the internal circumstances in the country and of course the external circumstances in the world around us. And we cannot have the luxury of continuing business as usual when all around us we see all the familiar things, a milepost that we were so comfortable with, falling over and changing, almost as if the very earth we stand on itself was moving from under our feet. It would be folly to continue to do business as usual. And that is why, after 30 years of the 1992 Constitution, we must reform the Constitution now, and we must have a referendum before the next election. My presentation is going to focus on why we need to do that and how we can do it. But I will first like to recap on some of the reasons of why, because just to refresh our memory so that it is put in a broader context. Our organization is a non-partisan organization, and we are focused on constitutional reforms for the past 6 years, based on past and current consultative processes that are more or less captured in the Constitutional Review Report, but also captured in the presentations of CSOs, many of them who have also presented today. So it is not a novel idea. It is a burgeoning demand that our political actors have refused to listen to. And why have they refused to listen to it? Because they have been caught up in the quagmire of a stagnant duopoly, where only the politics of equalization is what is heard. And I'm glad that you've given the opportunity for another view to be heard, which is actions for the progress out of the quagmire. And in focusing on those constitutional reforms, there are key areas. They're not exclusive to us, they're shared, because they will have pervasive impact if you make those constitutional changes. And we've narrowed them down to 7, but they're by no means exhaustive. The key one you have heard, which is to redress the imbalance in the power between the arms of states. Many people call it excessive, powers of the presidency, but it goes beyond that because there are institutional aspects of it that we need to deal with. I'm not going to go into too much detail in those today because I want to cover ground and get to the imperative of why we must make those changes. But it's fair to say that the major purpose of this would be to resolve the conflicts of interest vis-a-vis the legislative and the judiciary. And we all know what that means in their appointments and also in the appointment of ministers from the legislature, not to mention the control of budgets. So we need to rectify that. We also need to resolve the conflict of interest of Article 71 holders, where more or less you ask me to approve my own salary, and my conditions of emoluments. Of course, it will be disproportional to the rest of the people. So we want adjustments in those as well, in terms of the reforms that we seek. Now, when we rationalize those emoluments, we will then have a basis for saying from the income generated, what is relevant to pay a particular person down to the last person. When you don't pay heed to the income we generate and you just start dishing out, of course, it will become like irrigation from Accra to Bolgatanga. The first few meters will be overly soaked, but from Kumasi going on will be dry. And that's what happens in terms of emoluments and remuneration of peoples in the populace. And then you don't get the buy-in that you want other people to have. So I think we have to be very clear about that. We also have to be clear about accountable political representation at the local government level on non-partisan basis. This is the last front where we can say enough. The political parties have already taken up all the space. Leave the small space of local government for the general populace to elect their leaders on non-partisan basis so that party machinery cannot override the choices of individuals. That is very important. And I cannot state enough that the general feeling of the populace is in support of non-partisan representation, because not only does it give us somebody who belongs to all of us and we all feel included, but also it allows us to begin the process of experimenting with an alternative form of representation that we can grow organically from the grassroots level. And we hope it will even virtually come to a balance with the partisan one we have adopted at higher levels. So it is very important and should not be dismissed lightly. Associated with that is also the imbalance of resource allocation between the center and local governments. We must come to a stage in our constitution where a fixed percentage of the revenue, not less than 25% and possibly 35%, is shared by a known formula amongst local governments based on population size and level of infrastructure development, and also a catch-up factor given as additional conditional grant for investing in specific areas that will help those behind to catch up. We cannot just hope by broadcasting the seeds from Accra that the field will be equally germinated. It isn't. We've tried it for so many years. In fact, what we have is a migration from the rural areas into Accra, creating even more problems for infrastructure here. So you've got to do something deliberate. You cannot just do the usual things and hope for something different. Associated with that, you have to ask yourself the question, where are we now with local government in the middle of no man's land? Yeah. Do we want autonomous local governments or don't we? And if we do, are we going to make them financially independent, give them an economy of scale, and also give them accountable leadership? These three things must go together. And I think that we now have too many districts for us to be able to budget for them and for them to be autonomous. And the scale, in terms of the economy of scale, they're too small. So we now need to take the bold step of saying, we've tried this, it's had good effects, we can keep the good parts and then eliminate the bad parts. Let us bring back local government to regional level and have about 30 regions and have local government housed there. Still elect the local government executive on non-partisan basis, so we have like a regional governor instead of a regional minister, and he will have his budget, which we have, consigned to him by virtue of our constitutional allocation. That way, not only will we be able to recenter local government where it has scope for growth, an economy of scale to grow, a tax base to develop and exist in reality, and not just wait for government subventions, but also we will be housing it where a higher caliber of technical and professional expertise will be happy to live and serve. And we have to be realistic in that you cannot get some of these highly qualified people to go and live and work in some of these existing districts. So, and in any case, we don't have enough of them. So by reducing the number from 260, whatever it is now, to 30, you would be able to reallocate from the center enough people to live in these areas, form a hub, to be able to execute local government together with their regional, local government executive. Now, what that would also mean is that the parliamentarians would now need to graduate from looking after constituencies and representing constituencies before they come into the executive at the regional level. And from the regional level, you have a way of selecting those that you want to go to the national level. This business of jumping people who perhaps have never seen 5,000 Ghana cedis in an envelope, all the way to look after billions of cedis in the ministry, is ridiculous, and we must stop it because it doesn't make common sense. You grow people through experience and through capacity. You don't just jump them into positions, and then when you get the results you don't want, you start complaining. Yeah. So we must inbuild a system of growing and maturing leadership and administrative capacity embedded in the system itself. And that will eliminate the business of DCs and MPs always holding each other's shirts at election, who is going to be the MP, and who, because it translates into who might be a minister. All those things are resolved. Now, on the issue of our electoral laws, I'm pleased today to have seen I don't know whether to call him my son or my political son or my biological son, Ernesto, start to focus on key areas. And I thought he made a very brilliant submission on the need for electoral reforms and electoral representation, and also a first past the post system, which is one of the key elements of the 7-point agenda in terms of broadening representation. We advocate for the formation of coalition governments. You can use any kind of system you want. We can evolve it ourselves. But the formation of coalition governments will eliminate the need to go for a second round after the first round of elections. Now, we ourselves can decide what kind of proportional representation we want, etc. After all, when the British flag came down, nobody asked us what kind of representation we wanted. We just adopted the British parliamentary system. So now we have a chance to evolve our own. Right. And it is very important that we do that. Now, the other reason why we want to do this is also because of the winner-takes-all phenomenon.
So if you may speak to one last...
Yes. Well, the adoption of a long-term national development plan, I think, is very important because it moves us from short-term thinking to long-term thinking. And also, it obviates the need for us to keep improvising manifestos based on promises that we can't keep anyway, to manifestos based on milestones within the National Development Plan for a certain segment of development at that time, based on our realistic income at that time. So manifestos will no longer be promises. They'll be basically reading of budget statements. If you promise to do A, B, C, and D, how are you going to pay for it? And that is a question we have never asked politicians in Ghana, and we must do that.
All right.
But I would like to finish lastly on talking about the reasons why we must have a referendum before the next election. It will take away many of the things that we have been struggling with and ensure that this post-independence generation is able to bequeath to the fourth Republican generation a constitution that will expand their horizons, allow them to grow and enhance development, and remove all the roadblocks that have become entrenched interests of the political elite. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Abu Sakara Foster. He's been speaking on redefining our democracy for accelerated development, constitutional reforms now, looking forward, imperatives for agriculture, food security, and economic growth. Of course, he couldn't exhaust all his issues. Now, in the next 3 minutes or so, you will have the Joy Sports link. Nathaniel Atto will host a team of seasoned analysts to delve into the recent betting scandal in the Ghana Premier League, which led to the demotion of Ashanti Gold and Inter Allies. How deep-rooted is this problem, and what happens beyond the demotion of these two clubs? Don't miss the Joy Sports link, which comes your way in the next 2 minutes or so. I'll give 1 minute to Professor Henry Kwesi Prempeh to list his recommendations, at least 2 of them, so that time is up. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you very much. This has been actually, I've just had such a wonderful time listening to the various speakers. As you're well aware, I do support some amendments to our constitution. But what I am going to propose, I'm not going to propose constitutional amendments. One of the problems with sticking with constitutional amendments as the solution to many of the problems in the governance arena. It's essentially admitting, making an admission that without them, without those constitutional reforms, we're stuck. And I do not want to actually feel ourselves immobilized that way. So I will put, the recommendations I have will come in the nature of legislative reforms, reforms that we can do right now.
All right.
We don't have to wait for politics.
Okay, Prof, let's list them. My time is up.
First is Political Parties Act. Let's go back to the Political Parties Act. Essentially, make a complete do-over of it, right? Since my remarks focus on political parties, we need to take Article 55 plus 5's statement about parties being internally democratic seriously and stand on that and flesh out very clear and specific rules as to how parties should operate internally. Rules, again, on primaries, on all, we should make sure that all our parties operate according to a certain standard statutory framework. That is one proposal. We need elaborate rules for campaign and political party financing. Elaborate rules for political party and campaign financing. And I believe we need a new independent political party regulator, a new body to be the regulator of political parties with powers to sanction and the like, not the EC. The second is in order to decouple the party from the state and this party-state kind of structure that we're in, I think we need to make a major overhaul of recruitment and selection into our public services, especially our state enterprises, which have become really those places that provide the financing, through appointments, through all kinds of shenanigans, provide a huge flow of resources to underwrite this party capture of the state.
All right.
So it's one other recommendation. And finally, I would say we have a host of laws. One of the things we have done very poorly is statutory review. I know we've done one, but it was not a substantive review. It was mostly stylistic and trying to update our statutes in a non-substantive, policy way.
Prof, I'm very sorry.
Major review of laws vesting discretion in ministers and the president. These laws go back to the colonial period. It started with the governor. If the governor is satisfied that so and so is so, he can do that. If the governor, as he so feels, whatever, those laws are inconsistent with the kind of democracy we are operating today. And we need to go back to all of those laws, many from the 60s, and completely revise them.
That clearly brings into focus the executive instrument on the Achimota Forest, because if the president is satisfied, then that is fine. I can't say thank you enough. And the management of this institution, the multimedia group, have actually sent me a message to say thank you to all of you, Bridget Jogbanuku, Dr. Kwame Akufo Anofinto, Nana Kofi Akwa, Dr. Abu Sakara Foster, Afia Agbenyo, Ernest Yabua, Professor H. Kwesi Prempe, Kweku Ando Awoche, Lamnatu Adam, and Professor A.C. Sutherland Ade. Thank you all so very much. This has been our Joy Speaker, Change Speaker Series 2, Impacting Influence for a Better Ghana. And this show, as always, my outfit is brought to you by Habil Scooter. You can find them at Dringano Gate, East Legon. You can call them on 0200 84 19 88. Have a good afternoon. I'm Samson Lardy Anyenini.